Order. Daniel Zeichner to move the motion.
On behalf of the Petitions Committee, that this House has considered e-petition 229744 relating to college funding. And it's a pleasure to serve with you and the Chair, Mr Walker. And could I just say, I formerly, before I came to this place, worked for Unison, one of the trade unions representing staff in colleges, and I'm a member of Unite. And may I start by reading the petition submitted by Charlotte Jones, a student at Brockenhurst College in Hampshire, and congratulate those who promoted it, including the thousands who lobbied Parliament a few months ago, and the excellent work done by organisations such as the Association of Colleges, the Association of Sixth Form Colleges, UCU and Unison, and the almost 70,000 people who have signed it. And it's great to see so many members in the hall today. I can't believe they're all fleeing the main chamber for one reason or another at the moment. I hope it is because of their enthusiasm for the subject under discussion. And may I, Mr Walker, start by reading the petition, which is entitled, "Increase College Funding to Sustainable Levels. All Students Deserve Equality. We call on the Government to urgently increase college funding to sustainable levels, including immediate parity with recently announced increases to schools funding. This will give all students a fair chance, give college staff fair pay, and provide the high-quality skills the country needs. Funding for colleges has been cut by almost 30% from 2009 to 2019. A decade of almost continuous cuts and constant reforms have led to a significant reduction in the resources available for teaching and support for sixth formers in schools and colleges, potentially restricted course choice, fewer adults in learning, pressures on staff pay and workload, a growing population that is not able to acquire the skills the UK needs to secure prosperity post-Brexit." And may I start by suggesting, Mr Walker, a simple question to the Minister. Why? Why are 17 and 18-year-olds in colleges and sixth forms worth so much less than younger pupils or university students? I'd be very happy to give way to my friend.
I'm very grateful to him. He's starting to make out a very strong case about further education. The answer to his question, my belief is that we have a government here who fundamentally do not understand what further education is for. We have a government full of people who have never experienced the further education sector, and that's why they so undermine it.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I'm going to develop a very similar case in a moment, but I suspect it goes wider than government, I'm afraid, because I suspect that the Minister and most others today will agree that it's simply shameful that this divide has been allowed to grow. Now, I suspect the Minister will blame the Treasury, and I have some sympathy, but I guess others will say it goes deeper, because this is not a new phenomenon, is it? The near invisibility of further education, and now apparently other colleges too, to people in this place is not new. Arguably, it's at the heart of our current political problem. A divided country with too many left behind and ignored. No wonder the educational divide mirrors the EU divide almost exactly, which is why I would argue it's in everyone's interest, everyone's, that this huge injustice is tackled. So let me go into some more detail to start with regarding the petition. Then I'll move to discussing the national picture alongside some local examples to me and the impact of the current funding squeeze. The petition calls on the Government to urgently increase college funding to sustainable levels in order to give students a fair chance, give college staff fair pay, and provide the high-quality skills that the country needs. The petition notes that funding for colleges has been cut by almost 30% over the last decade, stretching resources, support and staff available. I'd be happy to give way to my friend.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for giving way. In Hartlepool, we have three excellent 16-plus providers, the FE College, Sixth Form College and English Mark School. Some of their cuts since 2010 have gone up to 62%. Does he agree with me that we need urgently to address funding in order to avoid the irreparable damage that might do to our colleges?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. I suspect we may be going on a regional tour of colleges over the next 20 to 25 minutes or so, but it's a picture that's familiar across the country, all too recognisable across the nation. Now, I represent Cambridge, a place rightly associated with excellent education, but where higher education often dominates much of the agenda and discourse. And somehow that makes the contrast all the more stark between the focus on higher education policy and, frankly, the resources, and that which goes to further education. And I think many of us will remember the huge national outrage when tuition fees for university students were introduced and then later trebled. But I have to say, when fees were introduced in further education, where was that outrage? Where were the marches? In my patch, I found that it was just me and a handful of local trade unionists out there talking about it. So thanks, Pete Monaghan and others from Cambridge. Some noticed, but the vast majority didn't. And was it considered newsworthy? Hardly at all. But I will.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. And I would like to add to the points he's making. Where was the outrage when the educational maintenance allowance was taken away, which seriously affected students in further education, many of whom were unable to afford the bus fare to even get to college and receive an education?
Yeah. My honourable friend is absolutely right, and almost worthy of a whole debate in itself. But it wasn't just the educational maintenance allowance, of course. Where was the outrage in the country on the near collapse in mature and part-time students? You can read about it in the pages of the specialist press, but I think we all know why it doesn't reach any further. I see my honourable friend ready to make some strong points.
Just on that excellent point, does he agree with me that what we don't need to hear from the government is bringing back grammar schools, it's funding night schools? And if indeed we exit from the European Union, shouldn't we be giving people in our seaside towns, northern industrial areas and parts of London the skills to compete in the economy that we're going to have?
I agree with my honourable friend, and characteristically, and of course he has been campaigning on these issues very powerfully. I just hope that people are listening. Let me turn, Mr Walker, to some of the numbers. According to the House of Commons Library, in 2010, the average funding allocation was £4,633 per student. Today, the 16 and 17-year-old funding rate has been frozen at £4,000 since 2013-14. The rate for 18-year-olds was cut to £3,300 in 2014-15 and has remained frozen since then. Funding per student aged 16 to 18 has seen the biggest squeeze of all stages of education for young people in recent years. By 2019-20, funding per young person in further education will be around the same as it was in 2006-7. Only 10% higher than it was 30 years earlier. Of course. Oh.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that the £3.3 billion of cuts in further education since 2010 is utterly devastating? And given the higher proportion of working class students who attend further education colleges, and I was one of them, does he agree that this government is hell-bent on making life a misery for working class people in this country?
Honourable friend makes the point very powerfully. As I said, I see it in my own city in that divide, but she's absolutely right. I think another honourable friend would like to intervene.
I thank my friend for giving way. He rightly mentioned the £4,000 rate freeze. Does he agree that, well, would he like to know that had the rate increased by inflation since 2013 to today, that figure would be almost £4,300 just on kept pace with inflation, which for cities like Stoke-on-Trent would have been like £2.5 million more funding for further education. What sort of money does he think we could have done with that?
My honourable friend makes a very powerful point. I think when many of us go into institutions and ask, what could you have done? What would the difference have been had you had these resources? It is very telling, and I'm sure we will hear accounts from others, and I will come on to some of the implications of the numbers in a moment.
Way.
I certainly will.
Thank you so much. He's making a powerful case. Just to put one positive spin on it for this government in the beginning, my local college listened to me and they're very pleased about the bus passes for the 16 to 18-year-olds. That's made a great deal of difference for their students. But on the points he is raising about finances, my two colleges, the excellent Richard Hewish College, which is in the top 10 in the country, and Bridgewater and Somerset College, both of whom do an excellent job, have both raised concerns about finances. And what they're finding is the cuts are meaning that they can't offer staff as much as systems outside of the FE system, and they're finding it difficult to recruit. So I wonder if the honourable member might comment on that. And in the light of the fact that schools outside of that system did get a 3.5% pay award, which is hugely welcome, and I know those teachers in that system are welcoming it, would he agree that really they should look at the FE system and at least bring it into parity with that?
Daniel Zeichner.
Strangely enough, the Honourable Lady will hear from me in a moment about some of the staffing issues. I suggest she perhaps addresses those points to her own side, because they're the ones who are in the position to do something about it. But I'd also say that I think young people will be even more enamoured by free bus passes for people up to the age of 25 in future. But spending per student in school sixth forms, Mr Walker, will actually be lower than at any point since at least 2002. And while there are some minor scraps of comfort around funding for meals for certain subjects or extra hours for T-levels, I don't think this goes any way to address the cuts that we have seen. Now, the issues are slightly different for sixth form colleges offering A-levels and further education colleges offering a number of different qualifications, but the problem of cuts is universal to them. And our friends at the Sixth Form Colleges Association, who have been tirelessly campaigning on this with their Raise the Rate campaign, have attracted the support of many, many MPs, and they're calling for the national funding rate, the rate of funding per student for 16 to 18-year-olds, to be raised to at least £4,760 per student, including 18-year-olds, and to ensure that this is kept in line with inflation year on year. I'd like to take one at a time. My honourable friend here, and then the honourable lady.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. On 18-year-olds, it is puzzled as I am that 18-year-olds are the cheapest people in the world to educate at $3,300, when in actual fact my experience tells me that people are on an additional year are actually the most demanding people to teach.
My honourable friend makes a very, very important point. Of course, they suddenly miraculously become much more expensive when they turn up at a university. It's amazing, that, isn't it? I think the honourable lady wished to intervene.
I'm Jen for giving way, and I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole debate. I'm chairing another committee. But I did want to put on record, I'm sure he may go on to it later in his speech, the special needs funding, which is incredibly important. My school, my college, Oaklands College, has 200 pupils having special needs funding, and the pressures that puts on that college is huge. And I am fully aware that there are cutbacks to be made, but sometimes services just have to be provided for those people who have a particular need, and a particular need to get their life back on track.
I couldn't agree more with the honourable lady, and in fact I will be coming to that exact point later in my speech. I just want to turn, Mr Walker, to some of the effects of this underfunding. It's significant and has damaging consequences in sixth forms. In total, I'm told that 50% of schools and colleges have dropped courses in modern foreign languages as a result of funding pressures, with A-levels in German, French and Spanish the main casualties. Now, at a time when we're told that we're going for global Britain, that really doesn't seem to be the right way to be going. Over a third of sixth forms have dropped STEM courses, while two-thirds have reduced student support services, such as mental health support, which we know is increasingly needed and required. And, of course, they've also, in many cases, limited careers advice services, which also has a very damaging effect. Two-thirds of schools and colleges have moved from a 4-subject offer to a 3-subject offer, significantly reducing student choice and ultimately narrowing their options after study. And for state schools with sixth forms offering post-16 study, the underfunding affects the education of all students, because, of course, as we know, what they frequently do is they cross-subsidise post-16 education with the funding meant for 11 to 16-year-olds. So, across all 16 to 19 provision, it seems quite incredible that a country that quite rightly requires its young people to participate in education or training until the age of 18, that we reduce investment in education so sharply at the age of 16, from £5,341 for a 15-year-old to just £4,000 for a 16-year-old. I happily give way to my friend.
He's making an excellent speech. Would you agree that the level of cuts is so extreme that very dramatic steps are being taken? My Ealing-Hammersmith West London College is one of the biggest in the country, but it's cut its A-level completely. It's cut back on ESOL because funding hasn't been available for that. And it's now redeveloping its sites in order to release land to just keep itself going. How can we plan for the future of FE when there is so much uncertainty and so little finance available?
Mr Zeichner.
My honourable friend makes a very good point, as he always does, and I think the answer is it's very difficult when you speak to people working in the sector for them to plan ahead. After the years of area reviews and all the rest of it, it has been a very tough time, and at the moment the situation doesn't look that good for them ahead. I'd like to tell you a little bit about further education colleges, if I may, Mr Walker, which provide our communities with access to skills across the board, and we see even more diverse challenges there, because while in their response to the petition we're debating, the government have claimed their commitment to the adult education budget, in reality, the initial teaching and learning funding allocations for adult further education and skills in England fell from a baseline of 3.18 billion in 2010 to 2.94 billion in 2015-16, a reduction of 14% in real terms, and more for the non-apprenticeship part of the adult skills budget. Since then, there has been an increase in funding for apprenticeships, but that really cannot make up for all the thousands of people across the country who have been suffering as a consequence of these cuts, who want to upskill and reskill as technology changes our jobs and our lives. And what about those who work in the colleges? We have heard reference to staff. Staggeringly, college teachers are paid on average £7,000 a year less than those in schools, according to the Universities and Colleges Union. In conjunction with busier jobs and fewer resources, this is stretching staff to breaking point, which I think any of us who go into colleges will know and hear about. Happy to.
On that point, very recently, 57 members of staff were made redundant at the Warrington and Vale Royal College in my constituency when the Northwich campus was closed. There's £4 million funding pressure there as a direct result of this under-resourcing.
My honourable friend is right, and sadly it is a familiar story, not just redundancies, I'm afraid, but insecure contracts, and the level of morale really, really challenging for so many staff. And Unison's Head of Education, Ruth Levin, has pointed out that colleges have faced underfunding leading to job cuts, course closures and larger class sizes for many years. And she goes on to say, pay in further education has fallen by more than 21% in real terms over the past 9 years. It's clear that further education colleges have been hit harder than anyone else in recent years, and it's simply not possible to continue down this road of less funding and more demand. Absolutely.
Thank you. On that point, further education colleges are being asked to implement T-levels, but the T-level system, even though it's not been started yet, is already in crisis. The exam boards are taking the government to court, the colleges saying they're not able to cope in the funding, and also employers are unaware of them. Isn't this going to actually add to the burden of colleges?
My honourable friend raises some important points there. I guess it will be for the Minister to respond, but in a sector that has seen constant change and churn over many years, I think there is a yearning sometimes for stability. We do, of course, on that note, have the Prime Minister's review into post-18 education and funding that was announced last year and, of course, is eagerly awaited, although I guess the Prime Minister may have other things on her mind at the moment. Happy to.
Just whilst he's making the point about pay and the impact on recruitment and retention, does he agree with me that this is especially acute for specialist areas? Sheffield College has seen significant growth in the delivery of higher apprentices in engineering and manufacturing, but are really struggling to recruit in those specialisms. They've run 4 recruitment campaigns, but are still finding it almost impossible to recruit. These are areas that are crucial for the future of our economy, and we need to make sure that they have full parity of pay so that we can attract the best and the brightest into this sector.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for raising that. I wasn't aware of that, although I have to say recruitment in high-cost areas like mine is a continual problem as well. And, of course, at these levels of pay, hardly surprising. Just to return to the Auger review, Mr Walker, I fear we will probably have much of the same old story. I suspect there will be warm words about further education. My guess, certainly in terms of the coverage, I would expect, yet again, the world's focus to be on higher education and universities. Important though they are, I fear there are unlikely to be real solutions for colleges. But we live in hope, we shall see. Yes, my regional neighbour.
Made a very interesting point there, but in a coastal community like the one I represent, Lowestoft, Sixth Form College and East Coast College are vitally important from the link from education to the workplace and improving social mobility. And we've probably got to have a change in mindset in this country in how we fund post-16 education.
My friend Mr. Zeek is absolutely right. It was something, of course, we were discussing in the all-party group for the East of England only a few days. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we can have cross-party consensus on this kind of change? Because even the Further Education Commissioner told the Education Select Committee earlier this year that further education funding is unfair and sparse. And I've seen this at my own FE college, Cambridge Regional College, which I visit very regularly. And I see the excellent work that staff do with students and apprentices from right across the east of England, but the college remains under-resourced and overstretched. And Mark Robertson, the principal, tells me, and I quote, Colleges train 2.2 million people annually, and that further education students aged over 19 generate an additional £70 billion for the economy over their lifetime. However, colleges and schools are facing increased pension costs, and colleges have not yet had assurance that this increased cost of around 2% of all income will be funded. This makes no economic sense to me. With colleges adding such huge value to the economy, why are we hitting them so hard? And a similar situation can be found at the fantastic sixth form colleges in Cambridge, at Hills Road and Long Road, and the sixth form provision at Parkside and Netherhall. And all their teachers tell me the same thing, and I see it week after week when I go there. Brilliant, hard-working, energetic young people, but they increasingly feel the system is stacked against them. Hills Road is often cited as one of the best state sixth forms in the country, but they've told me about the impact of cuts on their provision. They have £100,000 less to spend on additional learning support for students who need it today than in 2010. They've been forced to offer fewer subjects. Many students take fewer subjects. The average class size has grown by 2, while per capita student funding has dropped by over £1,000. Happy to.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. Ipswich was very pleased to welcome the previous Secretary of State's opportunity area status, which we were granted in order to try and improve the not very good social mobility. But actually, there is no way we are going to improve social mobility if we don't actually have the facilities in place, and in particular, the skilled and competent staff to be able to provide that additional social mobility.
My honourable friend and near neighbour is absolutely right, and it's a key issue for the east of England, often seen as a prosperous, successful region, but the skills shortages have been a problem for a long, long time, and they need to be addressed. If I could also quote Yolanda Botham, the principal of Long Road Sixth Form College, another excellent college in Cambridge. She tells me, the current level of funding has meant for Long Road that we've had to reduce our curriculum offer. We no longer provide A-level German, for example. We've had to reduce the broader opportunities, the enrichment opportunities we can provide, limiting the number of trips and experiences we can offer, which really matters for social mobility. Visits and trips show what's possible and enable students to see beyond their immediate horizons. And she says it's particularly galling to note that our private school neighbours charging £17,000 annually do not have to pay VAT, yet we do.
I thank the honourable member for taking an intervention, and would he agree with me that it seems a bit perverse in the days of Brexit to be cutting back on foreign language provision?
Indeed it is, but this place is full of ironies, isn't it, on a daily basis? If I could continue with her comments, she says that for her college, that £200,000 extra a year could really make an important difference, such as supporting through subsidy more students to take advantage of university summer schools and other opportunities, exactly the kind of points about social mobility that colleagues have been making. An increase in funds would allow us to better cater for the mental health needs of our students, and so over time maybe reduce the demands on the NHS. This is an increasing need amongst our young people.
Thank you. My own friend's making an excellent speech. I recently met with principals from across the Lancashire colleges, including Blackpool and the Fowle College and Lancaster and Morecambe College. And the point that they really stressed across to me is it goes beyond subject provision. But FE colleges now are absolutely on the front line of supporting young people through what can often be very challenging mental health needs at a time when the NHS cannot cope and cannot meet those needs fast enough. Will my honourable friend agree with me that FE colleges provide far more than just basic qualifications in education? They actually support young people through what can often be a very challenging time?
Zeichner.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think this is a message we hear both in colleges and in universities. The demands are rising, and at that time, if they're having to cut back to just their very, very core provision, who helps and what happens next when those problems arise? The cost moves somewhere else. And the issue of colleges paying VAT has been a long-running problem for sixth forms, and it really is a kick in the teeth for head teachers who are doing their best to balance their budgets while competing with private schools who are exempt. And the problems go wider still. The Chief Executive of Cambridge Academic Partnership, the multi-academy trust which runs Parkside Sixth Form in Cambridge, spoke to me about the impact of cuts on the International Baccalaureate. He says that the diploma programme is recognised across the world as a rigorous qualification and well regarded precisely for the breadth of its curriculum. IB students distinguish themselves by undertaking study across the academic disciplines at a more advanced level. Therefore, they leave further education with an impressive knowledge base that spans their native tongue, a foreign language, the humanities, the sciences, mathematics and the arts. Within each of those disciplines lies a plethora of subjects from which students can tailor their diploma according to the nuance of their interests and future plans. State centres that offer the IB qualification do so due to their commitment to developing well-rounded students equipped to contribute across all sectors of society. After all that, of course, there's a but coming. You're going to interrupt the but. Very good. Yes,
I'm very grateful for the honourable member giving way. Last Friday, I visited my Barrow Hall College in my constituency in Warrington South. It was so refreshing to see so many young people engaged in politically, and also so much potential I have seen in them. Sadly, I fear that this potential is all too often being squandered by a further education system that is drastically underfunded. Does he agree with me that we should all support a Raise the Rate campaign in order to ensure that young people receive the investment they deserve?
Mr. Zeichner.
I very much agree, and I applaud his enthusiasm, that sense of enthusiasm that you get when you go into colleges, and then that slight sense of shame when you see the problems they're facing. And after the but, what the Chief Executive told me, he says, when funding is limited, the skill set that we wish to provide to our students is impacted. Registered IB centres wish to offer students sufficient choice between subjects to give them a learning experience that complements their interests and strengths. A lack of funding reduces that choice because sustaining the breadth of teaching expertise required becomes impossible. It is crucial that school funding reflects the importance accorded to a broad curriculum. If centres are forced to eliminate subjects, it either deters students from undertaking the programme or undermines the principles of the qualification itself, to be principled, broad-minded and internationally minded. Mr Walker, post-16 education is vital to the UK's prosperity. At a time when many fear that the government's stance on immigration is making access to skills more uncertain, I think it's foolish to underinvest in young people's education and training. To be competitive in a global marketplace, the UK must adequately resource the education of future generations. If the Home Secretary acts on the policy proposals in his immigration white paper, which will threaten the economy as it restricts access to skills so dramatically, it's essential that we push education and skills right up the agenda, or we will face a crisis that could take many years to resolve. We should be preparing now for this, as providing the people with the skills the country needs takes time, resources and support. And let me conclude, Mr Walker, by offering an alternative. Labour's 2017 manifesto made a real offer for education, a national education service. Free, lifelong education in further education colleges, enabling everyone to upskill or retrain at any point in life. The manifesto notes, our skills and training sector has been held back by repeated reorganisation, which deprives providers, learners and employers of the consistency they need to assess quality. Labour would abandon Conservative plans to once again reinvent the wheel by building new technical colleges, redirecting the money to increase teacher numbers in the FE sector. Now, I'm sure my honourable friend on the shadow front bench will have more to say, but this is a real offer for the further education sector and for students, and it has to be a strong offer. We cannot go on like this. We cannot go on without being able to answer the question, why do we as a country so undervalue our 16 and 17-year-olds? And I hope the Minister will be able to provide an explanation.
Question is that this House has considered e-petition 229744 relating to college funding. There is a huge number of members seeking to catch my eyes. If everybody sticks to 6 minutes, you should all get in. Mr Robert Halfon.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under you today, and I welcome my successor as Minister, I know, who has a passion for further education. We know that FE is vital for our economy. Done well, it can tackle 3 huge deficits: our skills deficit, our social justice deficit, and our social capital deficit. Our colleges are vital assets, institutes that should be at the heart of every community. And whilst we're talking about funding today, I should take the chance to praise my local college, Harlow College, one of the finest colleges in the country, that has had a significant amount of funds to develop an advanced manufacturing centre, a new maths school, and an aircraft college at Stansted Airport, one of the first of its kind in the United Kingdom. So I know that some funds are coming to our colleges, and it's one of the reasons why I've visited the college over 65 times since I've been a Member of Parliament. Nevertheless, the chasm in funding between education either side of a student's 16th birthday has now widened to 24%. The IFS has given the FE the dubious accolade of being the biggest loser in education, noting that it's the only area to fall in real terms year on year for more than 10 years. By 2020, we will be spending the same amount in real terms to educate and train 16 to 18-year-olds as we were in 1990. You might be forgiven that this was some sort of accidental failure of policy making. But the truth is it's much worse than this. On the 31st of January 2017, the Minister for Schools told the previous Education Committee that in 2010 the government decided to prioritise spending between 5 to 16 on the grounds that it had a more demonstrable impact on life chances than spending post-16 when presumably it would be too late. But people develop at different points on the education ladder of opportunity. For some, FE can be the chrysalis stage between the caterpillar and the butterfly. Of course.
Grateful to my right honourable friend. A recent report by the Centre for Social Justice showed that only 15% of those in the UK who start work at entry level will ever rise above entry level work, which is one of the lowest in the developed world. Does he not agree with me that colleges like my excellent college at Waltham Forest are actually the key for people to be able to upskill and change skilling, and therefore we shouldn't write people off at the age of 16, 17, 18, or even at the age of 35 or even 40? Colleges like his and mine are the real position, and therefore in some senses more important even than universities.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and it's why colleges are so important to social justice and helping ensure that those from disadvantaged backgrounds have that chance to climb the education ladder of opportunity, because we know that life chances are actually, whilst we know that life chances are actually largely influenced before a child starts school, a subject on which my committee is going to be producing a report on very soon. Now, FE colleges are the economic trampoline our country badly needs, and with 1 in 10 degrees now being achieved in colleges, there's huge potential for FE to drive forward the revolution in degree apprenticeships that we've called for in our recent report on value for money in higher education. The introduction of T-levels is a good sign that the government is getting behind FE, rather than perpetuating its status as a poor relation of secondary and higher education. But this excellent investment in T-levels is not the same as the core investment in FE. The 500 million for T-levels is additional funding for a new initiative. And T-levels are of the scale and seriousness far beyond the relatively small-scale targeted funds, which are eye-catching in a budget, but not something that will lead to long-term lasting change. Government needs to consider whether existing providers could deliver their policy objectives before embarking on new costly projects, such as the national colleges and institutes of technologies. We often announce new initiatives, but we should really bring together and strengthen what we already have. On 10th of October last year, in Love Our Colleges Week, we held a special session with the AOC, NUS and Sixth Form Colleges Association. James Kewen from the SFCA told us that, and I quote, "Too much of what we see in 16 to 19 now starts with a press release and works back. Policy by press release is quite damaging. And the much more mundane reality is we just need a higher rate of funding." And that's exactly what the Education Committee wants to see. That's why we launched our inquiry last April into school and college funding, to examine where the truth lies between the polarised debate between those who say that education funding has been subject to swinging cuts and those who claim that funding has gone up in recent years. Yes, our colleges need more money, starting with the core funding rate of £4,000 per student. But what is even more important is that the Department for Education comes up with a long-term strategy for schools and colleges. If the NHS can have a 10-year plan and 20 billion extra, why can't education and our colleges have a 10-year plan and the right money needed too? In the written evidence for our inquiry, the real terms reduction in funding post-16 was deemed inexplicable after the raising of the participation age to 18, especially when one accounted for the fact, as has been highlighted, that the cost of providing education between the ages of 16 to 18, particularly technical education, is higher. And this is evidenced by charges in the independent sector for post-16 education going up rather than down. In truth, in conclusion, Mr. Chair, changing all this is going to involve some self-restraint on the part of policymakers and ministers. We're going to need to resist the temptation to tweak, fiddle, focus on what we want the outcomes in 10 to 20 years' time to be, not what might be attractive over a shorter timetable. Yes, the committee is hearing evidence critical of the government's approach, but what we're trying to achieve, we're trying to help the minister, is to be as supportive of the department as we can be as it enters negotiations with the Treasury for the next spending review period. A select committee trying to help the department it oversees is certainly swimming against the tide, but I hope that our report, when it's drafted, leads to much more investment in FE colleges and a new long-term approach. And FE for too long has been called the Cinderella of education. We should remember that Cinderella actually became a member of the royal family and didn't didn't crash the carriage. But what we do need to do is to banish the ugly sisters of snobbery and underfunding.
Laura Smith.
And it's a pleasure to take part in this incredibly important debate on FE funding. It is obvious that the matter is of great importance to my constituency, as we were in the top 10 for responses to this petition. In my constituency of Crewe and Nantwich, we are lucky to have 2 sixth form colleges in Nantwich, Bryanlees and Melbank, and extremely lucky to have the very college that I myself attended in Crewe. It must be said that the college has changed dramatically since I was there. Not only has Cheshire College South and West changed its name, but the building underwent an incredible transformation during the last Labour government. And unlike the creaky 1960s tower block I enrolled at, we are proud of a modern facility with fantastic resources. The college provides a variety of courses. It boasts its very own award-winning restaurant, the Academy, that is run by students. It has a hair salon, a theatre and an incredible fitness centre. The college sits in a residential area of Crewe, which is a post-industrial town that suffers from high levels of poverty and people trapped in work that simply does not pay. Cheshire College South and West offers opportunities to many local school children and the community in general, offering space to community groups, meeting rooms for businesses and experiences that otherwise people simply would not have. It's sounding too good to be true. There's always a but with these things, Mr. Walker. And the big but is exactly the reason we are here today, and that is the huge challenges that the Cheshire College South and West faces regarding funding. And I am here to highlight this and make the Minister aware of how devastating it would be to my community to lose this excellent education provision. Sadly, we are already seeing the university that I attended, Manchester Metropolitan, withdraw its university campus in Crewe, which is a huge blow to our town. We cannot see FE opportunities shrink for my constituents also. A key point that I want to make clear to really illustrate the funding pressures facing FE is that in real terms, funding for 16 to 18-year-olds is back to the level that it was in 1990. And to put that into context, I was 5 years old then. Margaret Thatcher resigned that year and Nelson Mandela was released from prison. How can it be that 29 years later, funding has gone so far backwards? I have been informed that our college is facing considerable funding pressures next year, whilst costs continue to increase, causing a potential negative impact of over £1 million, and undoubtedly they will be making cuts. And we all know that cuts come in the form of jobs. And not only is that devastating for those dedicated to teaching, but also the opportunities available to our future generations, and not to mention the impacts on our local economy. It is important that I also make clear in this debate that pay is a major issue for both staff and the colleges that they work for. 2/3 of college leaders cite inability to match pay expectations as a major barrier to recruiting skilled staff. Yes, I will.
I'm really grateful for Open Way. I'd like to congratulate her on the powerful argument she's making. And the picture she's painted is very similar to Barnsley College, who I met with recently, who who highlighted they are really struggling to recruit core subjects. And to make matters worse, often students come to them below the standard they should be when they leave school, and that makes it even worse.
I think what I'm talking about, and indeed the Honourable Member is talking about, is reflective in all of the constituencies, and that's why we are here today. The University and College Union have made clear that funding reductions have meant many colleges have had to make difficult decisions about what to fund. For students, it has meant fewer hours for teaching and support and a more limited range of study choices. And for staff, pay has fallen in value by 25% in real terms since 2009. In cash terms, that means a £2,484 pay cut on the bottom point, rising to over £9,000 for experienced lecturers, and more for those higher up the scale. Where colleges have failed to implement the recommended pay rises, the fall is even greater. Since 2010, around 24,000 teachers have left the further education sector, around a third of the total teaching workforce. And why is this happening? Well, the Conservatives have ruthlessly cut funding for FE colleges and reduced entitlements for adult learners. This has led to diminishing numbers of courses and students and has plunged the FE sector into crisis. My party recognises FE is an essential part of our education system, playing an important role in both young adult education and lifelong learning. I firmly believe that after nearly 10 years of neglect, it is only the Labour Party who will correct the historic neglect of the FE sector by supplying the investment teachers deserve. After all, it was the Tories who scrapped EMA, which supported disadvantaged young people to stay in college, something so important to students in constituencies like mine. However, whilst we continue to have this Conservative government in charge of policy, I will appeal to the Minister once again. I have already written and asked questions on this matter. So first, what recent assessment has she made of the adequacy of government funding for further education colleges in England? Secondly, what assessment has her department made of the level of pay inequality between the schools, universities and colleges in the education sector? And thirdly, what assessment has she made of the recent letter from HM's Chief Inspector to the Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, which raised concerns about the significant underinvestment in the further education sector? I sincerely hope that the Minister can provide answers to these questions at the end.
Thank you, colleagues. Immaculate timekeeping. Sir John Hayes.
For most of my lifetime, perhaps for all of it, a misapprehension has pervaded and affected the application of government policy. That misapprehension has been that only through academic accomplishment can people gain esteem and fulfilment. Practical learning, as a result, has been perpetually neglected by governments of both parties. And it was in that spirit, against that backdrop, that I began debating these issues and considering them carefully as a shadow minister back in the mid-2000s, indeed working with the shadow minister there today, who at the time chaired the all-party skills group, to look at how we could elevate practical learning. To do so, it was necessary to challenge many of the assumptions that have permeated previously. Indeed, the assumption given life by the ambition, the much vaunted ambition of the previous government to send 50% of people to university. I always thought the problem with that was, what did it say about the other 50% that didn't go? The people went into practical subjects, into further education, into all kinds of other learning. And we had some success. We built apprenticeship numbers to their largest number in modern times, perhaps in all times. We protected the budget for adult learning, working with actually the Right Honourable Member for Twickenham, who was the Secretary of State when I was the Minister for Skills, Lifelong Learning and so on. But I have to say that that is now in jeopardy. And I do have to challenge the Minister on the decline in apprenticeship numbers, which has resulted in part from a misunderstanding of the new levy. I'm not against the levy as a matter of principle, by the way, but I think its implementation has been problematic, and in particular about the decline in adult learning. And I say that for these reasons. There is a strong utilitarian case for further education and training, and that is about feeding the economy with the skills it needs for us to prosper. That is a given, I think, and would be agreed by all members of this chamber. There is a communal case, a case for communal health in the value of practical learning. When people learn and gain new competencies, they grow, and as they grow, they become better citizens as they see themselves as more useful to those around them. But beyond that, there is, I will give way. I'm delighted to give way.
Would you accept that one of the most valuable things that further education did was to allow people to improve their language skills, whether they be native to this country or a migrant, and that also is people who want to learn a foreign language. That was always one of the ways in which FE colleges really did reach out and give people opportunities. Would you agree with that?
Well, FE colleges, as the honourable gentleman knows, train 2.2 million young people and adults, and the range of courses they run range from, as he suggests, fundamental issues like the acquisition of good English through to the most advanced skills, as well as providing an opportunity for people to learn throughout their lives. FE is the principal vehicle by which people upskill and reskill in the way my honourable friend described, essentially in itself to fuel the economy with what it requires. It's simply not enough to train people entering the workforce. We have to look at people in the workforce already and how they can adapt what they can do to suit changing economic circumstances. I will give way very briefly.
Very nice as he's touched on that. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving way. And would you agree that FE colleges, particularly my Bridgewater and Taunton College, are really important in delivering the apprenticeship programme? And this particular college I've named has just won a Lion Award. It's doing such a good job. But whilst the government's apprenticeship programme must be commended, particularly the Minister's work, would my right honourable friend agree, for the programme to really be successful, we must address this funding for our FE colleges because they're so valuable in its delivery?
John Hayes.
Yes, I do think that. When I was the Minister responsible for apprenticeships, we not only boosted the number, we increased the quality. The first time we put into place statutory definitions of what an apprenticeship constituted. We moved away from the programme-led apprenticeships, which have been a feature of the previous regime. We said apprenticeships had to last a set amount of time, had to be linked to real employment, had to confer real skills needed by the economy. So she's right, that apprenticeships matter as long as they're of the right quality and they are substantial, and that's what we built. But I do have to say the levy has not been successful in maintaining that number. There are real question marks about the apprenticeship levy in all kinds of ways, and I'm sure the Minister will want to answer those questions when she sums up. I was finally going to say, however, in listing the virtues of further education and practical learning, that it leads to personal fulfilment. The case for education can be made, as I said, in terms of utility. It can be made in terms of communal health and well-being, but ultimately it should be made for its own sake. People are more joyful, more contented, better for the learning they gain in FE colleges across this country, and we should be proud of that. And so I end because you've sanctioned me not to speak for too long, Mr. Walker, which will come as a disappointment to my many admirers in the chamber. Mainly on that side of it, actually, but no, that's not entirely true. But I just finished by saying this. You know, we plant trees for those born later, and we fund and fuel and furnish skills for them too. For in building those skills, we build all of our futures.
Pidcock.
Than the previous speaker. This is a very pertinent debate, and I would like to say thank you to everybody that made it possible, the college sector, sixth forms and the UCU union, and members of the public who have ensured that we're hearing it today. It's something that is very close to my heart and the community that I represent's heart, as we have recently witnessed the very direct impact of 16 to 18 funding cuts in North West Durham, because last year Walsingham School was forced to close its doors, its sixth form doors to local pupils, we hope temporarily. But it's a very serious situation indeed. Of course, many factors were cited, but essentially it boils down to the fact that rural schools, which is well loved by the community, was starved of funding for many years, particularly at the top age range. In another part of my constituency, management and staff at Derwentside College are working incredibly hard to maintain standards in the midst of relentless real-term cuts to their budgets and decreasing per-pupil funding. In addition, Derwentside College, because of its large number of apprentices, have been disproportionately hit by the effects of the apprenticeship levy, whilst well supported across the board, has been bureaucratic in its implementation and hit numbers in key areas. All of this uncertainty has taken place in the context of real-term pay cuts for the incredibly dedicated staff, and I have no doubt that this picture is being replicated across the country. And I have to say that Derwentside College is a wonderful college, so warm and welcoming, and it's extremely important for my community that this resource is kept, because it's a place of safety, of refuge, and the harshness of everyday life, where people can come and they can study, they can learn for their future. But I have to agree with the intervention of a member before that I genuinely think that the government don't really care about further education, and I think it was pointed out earlier that it's disproportionately working class students that engage in further education, and perhaps that is why there is little care for that sector. But the crisis has been coming for many years, and the government has been warned over and over again that sixth form funding for 16-year-olds has been frozen for the years 2013-14. For 18-year-olds, it was reduced to $3,300 in 2014-15. But there is no logic or justification for these cuts or the levels of funding, and it's hard not to conclude that further education has just been an easy target. The sector is now beyond stretch. I would say it's at breaking point. In real terms, funding for 16 and 19 education has declined by 22% since the coalition government was elected. And over the same period, there has been an increase in student numbers and a decrease in the numbers of teaching staff across the sector. So sixth form colleges have been trying to perform miracles, and I think enough is enough. The government need to understand very clearly the result of these cuts. So courses are being stripped, restricting the options for my constituents in my community, what they can entertain as their future careers, and an inadequate transport system, which is very, very expensive. And I keep banging on about this, but transport is pivotal to people in my community, means that they can't easily just travel elsewhere for their education. Staff workload is increasing, and because of austerity and cuts elsewhere, and in public health services, colleges are seeing increasing students with mental health and well-being difficulties. And it's no wonder, is it, when poverty is entrenched. I know that some people go into that college and they've got no food in their bellies and they've got no money to buy any food. And those lecturers, those dedicated staff, make sure that those young people have got a meal in their belly so that they can study. That isn't accounted for in any spreadsheet, in any funding formula. They make sure that those young people have eaten so that they can study. And while some schools have been allocated funding to deal with mental health problems, I know it's still not enough. Colleges are being left out in the cold and have not had any additional funding for that. And the same goes, let's think about the staff. According to UCU Union, college pay has fallen in value by a quarter since 2009. In cash terms, that translates to 2,484 pay cut on the bottom point. This is a shocking and disastrous way to treat professionals in that sector. Teachers in education colleges on average earn about £7,000 less than a teacher in a school. And the result? Well, of course, it's no shock that since 2010 an approximated 24,000 further education teachers have left the sector, and that's around a third of the total workforce. Across the country, students and their families, the communities they come from and their future employers really value the work that colleges do, if only the government would listen. Never mind asking them to then love colleges. The context, and I suppose the crux of the matter is this, and it was mentioned before, and I really agree with this point, that the snobbery around further education colleges has to end. They are as important as any other sector. The Sixth Form College Association claims that in order to increase student support services to the required level, to protect minority subjects and to increase non-qualification time, for example, extracurricular activities, the government would have to increase national funding for 16 to 18-year-olds by £760 per student per year in the 2019 spending review. That is the bare minimum. That's just to stand still, just to survive. I suspect for a more expansive view of the college sector, we will need a change of government, and that can't come too soon for this sector.
Mr. Marcus Fish.
And I want to congratulate Mr. Walker, the many members of the public who have signed this petition on this extremely important matter. I wanted to set the scene a little bit by what happens in Yeovil. In Yeovil, we have a college which is incredibly successful. They do a fantastic job for their students, and they very much wish to be at the heart of skills development within the South East, to work with other colleges, to work with the local enterprise partnership, and really make a contribution, which they are very well set to do. The Minister will be aware that some of her officials have in fact been working with the college to help develop various elements of the apprenticeship scheme, which has been a great success, and indeed to think about what happens with the tier levels also. And one of the features of our area, that part of the southwest, is that it really is a hub for defence industrial manufacturing and the engineering and STEM skills that go with that. And so they do incredibly well and are real sort of exemplars for how to involve business, how to involve these businesses that quite often need skills that don't come out of universities in the same way, in developing both the programs for apprenticeships and T-levels and how they might look in the future. And in fact, I was in Leonardo, our helicopter manufacturer, which is the only end-to-end aircraft manufacturer that the UK still has, on Thursday, and met with their team who had been working with Yeovil College to help deliver the apprenticeship scheme, and they were incredibly enthusiastic about their college and what it can do for them as a company, but also for the wider community. I'm happy to give way to my honourable friend.
Grateful to my honourable friend giving way, and I asked him to do so only because, given that he's spoken so eloquently about Yeovil College, I ought to say a word about Boston College in my constituency. The students, governors and principal of which I met just last week, but I neglected to mention in my earlier contribution. They do a superb job.
Mr. Fish.
I thank my right honourable friend for his always eloquent contribution to the debate. So I sort of just wanted to say that in my visits to Yeovil College over the years, it has become very apparent to me that they do suffer from, despite wanting and having a great amount to contribute, they really do this incredible job on a shoestring. They have found the budgeting very difficult. They, for historic reasons, have a fabric of the college that can certainly do with improvement, and I have seen evidence of that. The college system, as I'm sure everyone in this room is well aware, doesn't have the ability to avail itself of capital grants the same way as the school and other parts of the education system can. And that really means that they have to make everything out of their basic income and their business with that. So that's a real disadvantage. And then when you add in as well, as we've heard earlier from other members, the fact that the revenue funding for further education students is a lot less than for university students, or indeed for secondary school students, that really puts them at a disadvantage when they're trying to deliver these programs. So, for example, and part of the problem with the T-levels system as proposed is that, you know, there's a lot of teaching extra there, but for not any more money. And I just wonder if we can have another look and if we can work together as a group to approach the Treasury and make the case that if we're going to get behind T-levels, as I'm sure we should for all the other reasons that we've heard, then we must make sure it's adequately funded so that our colleges can do a proper job of delivering for the people who, as we've heard, really depend on it. I thoroughly approve of thinking about colleges in terms of places where adult skills development can occur also, and we heard that earlier. Certainly, when we're talking about trade deals around the rest of the world, and because of the speed at which industry is changing anyway in the current technological age, what it means is that there's going to be a great demand, probably an increasing demand, for retraining during people's working lives. And it's essential, I think, that our colleges play a central role in that. So I would appeal. I mean, we have got examples already where maths gets extra funding. I wonder whether T-levels shouldn't be the same, and that we could really get behind that. And, you know, the other thing is that underfunding our colleges really, it really degrades the choice that individuals have in their area too. In Yeovil, for example, there is a great demand for secondary school-type places in the further education college. It actually does a great job of its sixth form and its A-levels. And that is the only provision of that within Yeovil itself. There are no choices. So it is really, really important to the town of Yeovil that we get this one right. So I just wanted to end really by saying that, yes, it is great that this petition has brought this issue up. It's of very real importance to everybody in my constituency that they have a really well-functioning Yeovil College that can deliver for the industry of our area and really take our local economy from A to B. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. It's a privilege to serve under your chairmanship. The numbers of people here today show really across party just how much value we put on the FE sector, and I certainly feel that very strongly. The Honourable Member for Harlow reminded us that funding has been going down in real terms for the last 10 years. I think this demonstrates one of the reasons why today's debate is so well attended, and it reminds us, frankly, that all of us have our hands dirty on this one, in my opinion. FE in my own constituency and across the piece is something I was very, very involved in when I was first elected as Member of Parliament, 2010-2015. I was the chair of the APPG on FE and lifelong learning. I was also the first MP to launch 100 Apprentices in 100 Days, which was very successful, copied by 200 other MPs subsequently over the ensuing years. And a key part of that was me getting to know the FE sector far better than I knew before, not just locally, but more importantly, nationally. And I became an absolute convert. I really did. And ever since that time, I've been committed to the belief that the FE sector, both for A-levels academic, BTECs and all the vocational side, provide a really important function in giving so many millions of people, millions of our fellow citizens from 16 upwards, an opportunity that they wouldn't have had before. There are a number of historical reasons, I think, why the funding has been frozen. I remember having long conversations with the then Secretary of State, my colleague from Twickenham, and I can tell you, believe it or not, that he fought like hell to fight off the then Chancellor and Tatton to try and get as much cash as possible. It was quite clear that that was one of the areas where the Liberals and the Tories had a slight distinction sometimes, albeit I appreciate the words from the Honourable Member earlier, who was one of our ministers at the time, is that we believe profoundly and passionately in the strength of FE, and it was a battle. We won some and we lost some, as we all know, which is the nature of politics. But where are we at today? I think we're reaching absolutely crisis level. The previous speaker mentioned about how someone teaching at my local secondary school, GCSEs, on average will be earning £7,000 more than the teacher who comes to the FE college in my constituency, which is East Sussex College, Eastbourne campus. The teacher there teaching them A-levels will be earning on average £7,000 less per annum than the teacher at the school, one of my excellent schools down the road in my constituency. That is just not sustainable. I beg the government to understand and appreciate it's not sustainable. I'll even go as far to say that it's, as I have mentioned earlier, it's not just the government's fault. I think this is something that we've all dropped the ball at to one degree or other over the last 10, 15 years. But there's an opportunity now for the government to change tack, to actually demonstrate to the House, to demonstrate to the FE sector, to demonstrate to the millions of people of all ages who attend FE colleges around the country. And in my own constituency, to demonstrate to those tremendous teachers at East Sussex College within Eastbourne who've been teaching A-levels really to a high standard, despite the shocking real-term cuts to their salaries over the last few years. So I look forward to the government acknowledging that there's a real issue and a real problem. I look forward to the government actually making a commitment today in this Westminster Hall debate to actually come up with additional funds at the perhaps in March budget. I look forward to the government not actually just saying empty words, but demonstrating they understand the strength of feeling within this chamber that FE just is actually not sustainable in its current terms. I also look forward to the government not using the T levels, £500 million, as solving the problem, because that's different. That's, as the Honourable Member from Harlow, Halpin, reiterated, that's a different set of qualifications, and it's something I support, actually. I think it's an excellent concept and idea, but that is not the same as the many thousands of teachers around the country, including my own constituency, teaching A-levels across the piece on salaries that are so much worse than the local schools. It's no wonder almost 25,000 have left the profession over the last couple of years. So I look forward to hearing from the government real beef and vegetables and real details about what the extra funding will be. Thank you.
Andrea Jenkins.
Your chairmanship. I believe that every young person should have access to an excellent education, and further education colleges play a vital role in achieving this. 111 people from my constituency of Morley and Outwood, including myself, signed this petition, and I made the decision to sign the petition because I recognise that more needs to be done to address and highlight this important issue. As co-chair of the All-Party Group on Education and vice-chair of the Social Mobility All-Party Group, I understand the importance that education has as the best way to improve your lot in life. That is why this issue is so important today and why I felt compelled to sign the petition. The government will have raised funding for school pupils aged 5 to 16 by more than 50% in real terms by 2020 than in 2000. This is to be praised and a record we should be proud of. However, looking at the House of Commons library figures, it is clear that funding for the 16 to 19 age group has fallen. The Institute for Fiscal Studies Research's annual report on educating spending in England stated that the equivalent of 16 to 19 student spending has fallen from 6,208 in 2010-11 to 5,698 in 2017-18. The average funding per student for the 16 to 19 age group is now less than that for secondary school age students and for higher education students. The IFS estimates this is now about 8% lower than spending per pupil in secondary schools. And I hope that this parity is something the government will be looking at in their response to this debate. The issue of local authority maintained schools, academies and sixth form colleges have to pay VAT is an issue that has been raised. Schools and academies are subsequently reimbursed for the costs through VAT refunds. However, no schemes exist for sixth form colleges. This is another area which I hope the government are looking at because this anomaly, it has been argued, places them at a disadvantage. The Sixth Form Colleges Association claims that the average sixth form college lost around $385,000 in 2015-16 because of this anomaly. And in November 2018, the Association of Colleges argued that the Treasury should use this opportunity afforded by Brexit to extend the VAT refund scheme to all publicly funded sixth form level education. Again, I hope that the government is looking closely at Brexit and any dividends that it could offer. Mr. Chairman, it's not all bad news and the government deserves praise where praise is due. Investment has been announced to strengthen education for 16 to 19-year-olds in certain academic areas. For example, as we've heard, a further £600 for additional students participating in Level 3 mathematics will be available, and 2 payments of £600 may be made, for instance, if a pupil is taking it in 2 years of maths study. Moreover, it was announced in the 2017 autumn budget that £40 million worth of funding has been allocated to establish centres for excellence in mathematics. Ministers have also made £300 million of restructuring funding available to colleges, and half of this has already been spent. However, the Honourable Member for Harlow, in his role as Chair of the Education Committee, I feel accurately said that successive governments have failed to give further education the recognition it deserves and for the role it plays in our national productivity puzzle. The Prime Minister has said that austerity is coming to an end. Well, this is an area where I hope the government are looking closely at because it is an area that certainly needs addressing. We need to invest in our young people if we are to achieve our ambitions for our economy. I agree with the Raise the Rate campaign when they say that if we are to meet our objectives for a strong post-Brexit economy and a socially mobile, highly educated workforce, then we need to increase funding in this area. This is not the time to point fingers and play party politics, not with our young people's future. Let us now increase college funding to sustainable levels and see a greater parity with secondary schools. I'd like to finish by thanking the education leaders in my constituency, including the fantastic Elliot Hudson College, who I recently visited, for the great work that they do in educating our constituents, both young and old. Thank you.
Yvonne Favage.
The issue is. It's really important to my constituency because we don't have school sixth form, so students have no choice but to go to a sixth form college. Wigan and Lee College offer the vocational route, they do that very well, but I want to concentrate on the 2 outstanding colleges in my constituency who offer the academic qualifications for the students who want to perhaps go on to higher education. And it's their problems with the chronic and sustained underfunding I want to talk about today. Winstanley College, in the last 2 years, has been named Educate North's College of the Year. Merseyside Educate's Most Inspirational 16 to 18 provider. And in April 2017, the Times Educational Supplement Sixth Form College of the Year. In addition, they've been rated as outstanding by Ofsted for the past 17 years. They have the Matrix Standard for Excellence in Support and Guidance. They have no problems attracting students. This year, they had 16 students offered places at Oxbridge, but they've had to cease offering German A-level. And the principal said to me, we're lucky that so far we haven't had to do more, but we can't carry on like this. There will be difficult decisions made in the future, and we'll give way.
I'm grateful to George House, my honourable friend, and she will be aware that there are children or young people from Knowsley who travel to Winstanley College in order to do their A-levels and very much appreciated the education they get.
Indeed,
Yvonne Favage.
The northwest to attend Winstanley College, and to have this college say that they don't think they can carry on offering the excellent academic qualifications that they do is indeed a tragedy for the social mobility in this area. Now, St John Rigby is my other college that's in my constituency, and they are also an award-winning college. And I'm really pleased to say that the title of Sixth Form College of the Year at Educate North happily stayed in Makerfield as it passes from Winstanley to St John Rigby. And they've also won the most inspirational 16 to 18 provider. But the principal feels that although students continue to get the excellent qualifications, the experience of the student isn't as rich as it was for the counterparts a few years ago, because every year something has to be removed from that which was previously provided as part of the overall educational experience. They're getting less specialist teaching than they did 3 years ago. It's a highly inclusive college. It really supports their students through the academic route. But they're taught their specialist subjects for 20 minutes fewer per subject per week than 3 years ago. That's nearly 3 weeks' worth of lost teaching per academic year. There's increased class sizes, approximately 2 extra per group than 4 years ago. Now that reduces the amount of time that the teachers can spend with the students, and the college do try to support every individual student. It also increases the workload of the teachers with more marking, and that makes them less accessible to out of the lessons. And their enrichment opportunities have absolutely decreased. Now, they've maintained the focus on employability skills and career pathways, and that's only been possible because of the cuts that I've mentioned previously. But the activities that have declined are the recreational activities, and they play an important part in student well-being and mental health.
Absolutely.
Now, St John Rigby have chosen to put their primary investment into teachers and quality of learning, but the capital investment has reduced to half of that from 4 years ago. And there's a decline in the college infrastructure and the estate, and that can't continue for much longer. And the principal said to me, it feels as though each and every year we're faced with an unpalatable decision of which priority which just about survived the previous year's prioritisation exercise can no longer be provided. Now, this is simply not good enough in an area where social mobility is extremely low.
Yep.
How are my students from the Wigan Borough supposed to continue to have high aspirations and become more socially mobile when their access to further education courses and support from the staff who teach those courses is being continually restricted by lack of funding? And more broadly, with the challenges of Brexit, how are we going to produce the competitive and the educated workforce of the future if there is a systemic underfunding of post-16 education? These colleges are doing their best to support the students who wish to take an academic route. Investment in T-levels, vocational education, be applauded, but it does nothing for Winstanley and St John Rigby and those students who want to take a different route. And therefore, for the sake of our future, the government have to look at raising the rate in 16 to education to £4,760 per student, and crucially, keep that rate at least in line with inflation.
Will Ragg, everybody keeps 6 minutes. We should get there. Mr. Ragg.
Congratulate the Honourable Gentleman Member for Cambridge for leading the debate. I'm pleased to speak in it, and I want to endorse the sentiments of the petition and put on record my support for the Raise the Rate campaign. For a number of years, I've been pressing the cause of increasing the school's funding budget, which is a topic I've often repeated. But of course, as the petition rightly calls for, it's important to remember the equality for all students, both pre and post-16. And so we really need to look at ways to increase college funding to sustainable levels to give parity. The bottom line is that the sixth form and college sector does need more money. This will give all students a fair chance, give college staff fair pay, and provide high-quality skills the country needs. There's been significant interest in this issue from my own constituents, with 130 of them signing the petition. In addition, I've recently had meetings with the principal, Danny Pearson, of the Aquinas Sixth Form College, which serves my constituency so well. I also know that the principals, teachers and students of the two other local colleges, namely Cheadle and Marple and Stockport College, are keen for urgent action to be taken and will be following the outcome of this debate very closely. Sixth form funding has been subject to restrictions of funding in 2011 and 2013. The national funding rate for 16 and 17-year-olds, which is by far the biggest component of the 16 to 18 funding formula, has remained frozen each year since 2013-14. It is also the case that as well as the funding disparity between pre-16 and 16 to 18 education, there are some areas where colleges are particularly disadvantaged. For example, schools, unlike colleges, have their VAT costs refunded and receive automatically the teacher pay grant. All sixth form providers are being asked to do more by the government, from implementing the PREVENT strategy to meeting the Gatsby career benchmarks. But these requirements are rarely, sadly, accompanied by additional funding. Taken in the round, this is all having a significant impact on colleges being able to deliver the quality of education that students deserve. And I fear affecting the government in achieving its ambitions for the economy and social mobility. The situation is also having the worrying impact of the narrowing of the curriculum. The funding impact survey carried out by Raise the Rate partners showed that 50% of schools and colleges have dropped courses in modern foreign languages, 34% have dropped STEM courses, and 67% report having reduced student support services or extracurricular activities, with limitations to mental health support, employability skills and careers advice. Happily give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Gentleman, for getting away, but can I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate? In, for example, Coventry, I've certainly got two colleges, but one's a special needs college and they do excellent work, but again they're struggling financially and resource-wise. And then I've got the City College in Coventry as well, so if you take a combination of both, they've had cuts up to about 27%. Now, that can affect the quality of apprenticeships because you've got companies like Jaguar Land Rover and the industrial base in the West Midlands want to expand. And these are a major factor because you need the skills to do that. Would the honourable gentleman not agree with me?
I certainly agree with him. I'm very pleased to have to afford him the opportunity to place that on the record, the work that these colleges do in Coventry. It's a timely coincidence that the Education Select Committee, which was always chaired most ably by my right honourable friend next to me here, of which I'm also a member, is currently conducting an inquiry into both school and college funding. And we've heard evidence from the post-16 sector. When asked what was top of their wish list, witnesses agreed that the priority is higher core funding. Second was separate funding for the increases to teachers' pay awards and pensions, as occurs in schools. And thirdly was increased funding for the capital expansion of colleges. We also heard that the college sector would much rather have a boost of core funding than a continued run of new initiatives. Some witnesses talked of an initiative mania and suggested that narrowly targeted uplifts can do more harm than good as they displace the real issue. For instance, plans to invest in technical education, although welcome, will do very little for the vast majority of sixth form students that study an A-level or applied general course. In itself, more money for T-levels is not, I'm afraid, the solution to sixth form and college funding. To ensure that colleges can continue to deliver high-quality, internationally competitive education, the Raise the Rate campaign, as has been mentioned already this afternoon, are calling for the national funding rate for 16 to 18-year-olds to be raised by £760 per student at the forthcoming spending review, and then, as the Honourable Lady mentioned before me, raised in line with inflation each year thereafter. Recent research has found that this is the minimum of additional funding required to increase support for students and their services. This includes improving mental and physical health of students. It is needed to protect subjects that are at risk of being dropped, such as modern foreign languages. It will work to increase non-qualification time and extracurricular activities, work experience, university visits, which are vital in preparing students for the world of work or higher education and are key drivers of social mobility. Furthermore, it is important that the rate rise is an addition to, rather than instead of, funding that may be required by schools and colleges to meet new costs, such as increased employer contributions to the teacher pension scheme. I know that my right honourable friend, the Minister, is a big supporter of the further education sector and wants the very best for pupils. We have seen this take form of different support, as I'm sure she will remind us in her winding up about the new per-pupil premium funding for Level 3 maths and the £40 million of funding to establish centres for excellence in that same subject, and indeed investment in the T-levels. But I really do encourage her to go beyond those initiatives and ask our right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, for this desperately needed raise of the rate of the core sixth form funding. I can think of no better minister to negotiate on behalf of the college sector, and I wish her well in the process of the spending review.
Vera Hobhouse, still quite keen on 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I can't think of an issue more important than education. At the heart of a functioning society is the education system. And ours is being cut to the point where it's barely fit for purpose. Further education is the worst funded part of an already cash-strapped education system. It is the only part of the education budget to have had a year-on-year cut for the last 10 years. And I know it's sort of fashionable to blame the coalition government. But I must say, coming from a different cultural background where practical education has been much more valued, I think the malaise has actually been a lot deeper and going on for a lot longer. We're really looking for a culture change where further education has the same value as university education. That really is what we need to achieve here, and I hope we are getting cross-party support from us. The IFS recently pointed out funding for 16 to 19-year-old education has fallen by 8%. The adult education budget has been cut by 45%. These are massive, massive cuts that severely affect students, staff, and everyone involved in the further education community. Over 24,000 teaching staff has been lost from the sector since 2009, and 90% of colleges report difficulties in attracting the staff they need. The sector is hemorrhaging talent and expertise, and it really is a criminal waste of potential. A constituency has actually asked me to attend this debate today. She has significant experience in the field, both as a student and a teacher, and she said this: people who emerge from school with few qualifications are now training and working as nurses, paramedics, social workers, vets, and many valuable careers because they had their chance at an FE college. It is this knowledge that keeps me working in the field despite dwindling resources and diminishing financial rewards. Further education is vital to social mobility, vital in training people for key worker roles, and central to the principle that this country invests in its people regardless of their background. In Bath, we are lucky to have a very well-performing college. Bath College demonstrates time and time again that young people don't have to go to university to do well in life. Bath businesses need young people who are work-ready with specific skills, and Bath College provides just that. However, like most further education colleges, they're really struggling. And I talked this morning to Laurel Penrose, the principal of Bath College, and she said this: the strain is telling on staff, and the offer and delivery is starting to be compromised because we cannot invest in the infrastructure and develop the capital enhancements we need to remain at the industrial standards required by our technical subjects. We are a unique educational sector, one that is recognized for our flexible approach and one with many of their solutions needed to address the skills deficit being experienced by this country. But we cannot grow or invest because of the funding difficulties. So I really hope that the Minister is listening to all of us across the House. Some of her staff went out on strike last year, one which I supported, but one that would have been completely avoided if the sector was being funded to allow staff equal pay to that in other parts of the education sector. The government is failing to properly fund further education, and it sends a very strong message. As a country, we need to get over the idea that university is not the only option for people who want to do well in life. Further education colleges have an important role in the education mix in this country, and the government should be taking it very seriously, not just with words. And the Liberal Democrats' support for lifelong learning is very, very strong. Our leader, the member for Twickenham, has already been mentioned, is a passionate supporter of further education and has launched the Independent Commission on Lifelong Learning, which is investigating the best ways to make sure adults have access to learning and retraining throughout their lives. And this could take the form of giving each person in this country a learning account, which they can use for educating the way they want. And I very much hope, again, that this is being further looked into. Well-funded education is of vital importance. We need to place opportunity in the hands of individuals and give them the tools they need to make the most of their lives and reach their full potentials. Without proper resources, we are failing a large number of people across our communities, and we must do a lot better. Further education has been the Cinderella of education, of the education system, and I would remind everybody, actually, that Cinderella was always the hardest working member of her family. Across the House, we should value the immense contribution of FE colleges and their past, current and future students for this country. We must value the sector and fund it properly. Thank you, Mr.
Peter Heaton-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. I'm sure it will be a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship for the remainder of this meeting. I have been lobbied strongly, repeatedly and effectively by the excellent further education college in my constituency, namely Petroc. The staff, the pupils, the management team there have been assiduous in ensuring that they get their message across. It really is an excellent further education college. It has two campuses. The main one, I'm proud to say, is in my North Devon constituency in Barnstaple. It has a second campus in the neighbouring constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Tiverton and Honiton. And between them, they educate or train around 10,000 people across all age groups, actually, in any given year. Now, as part of the communication that I've had with them, I received a letter only a few weeks ago, and I just thought it was worth quoting the principal's statement about the college and the work that it does. It says it better than I could. Diane Diamond, the Principal and Chief Executive Officer of Petroc. She says, as a leading further education college, you will know that we are an essential part of the region's education system, whether it's through top-class technical education, apprenticeships, A-levels, basic skills, or lifelong learning. We help people of all ages and backgrounds across Devon and beyond to make the most of their talents and ambitions. Rooted in the local community, I feel we are crucial in driving social mobility and providing the skills to boost local and regional economies. Well, I agree with Diane. She is absolutely right. I would add one thing as well, that Petroc, as well as so many other further education colleges, do play a vital role in driving this government's industrial strategy as well. They really are important. And the two main issues which they have lobbied me about, Mr. Bone, which I want to represent to the Minister here today, are firstly the general sense that funding for students in the 16 to 18 further education sector has not kept up. It's reduced in real terms since 2010. Now, this compares unfavourably with both the 11 to 16 sector and the post-18 sector, and it's that sense of an unlevel playing field which has come through loud and clear in what Petroc have said to me. It does suggest that further education is, I'm afraid to say, the poor relation, especially when we look at the work that the government is doing to improve funding of, for instance, the secondary school sector. And I've had many, many conversations with ministers at the DFE about this. I feel we're making progress there. I feel we're not making progress with the FE sector. The second issue which has been raised with me by Petroc is that the pay, the salary of lecturers and teachers in FE colleges has not kept pace with the pay and the salary of those who teach the same age group, 16 to 18-year-olds, but in sixth form colleges. Now, this seems to be slightly perverse because there are actually more people, 16 to 18-year-olds, who study at further education colleges than do at secondary schools who still retain a sixth form, a roughly 700,000 versus 400,000 split. So once again, we have, I'm afraid, not a level playing field in that regard. So Petroc have two asks, which I would echo. First of all, to look at increasing the funding of FE colleges to sustainable levels, as the petition says, and to provide the consideration to provide some exceptional funding to ring-fence, to cover the costs of a fairer pay deal for the lecturers and teachers who work so hard in the 16 to 18 further education college sector. Now, Petroc has had significant investment in recent years, and I want to stress what great new facilities it has. It's been my pleasure to visit many, many times and to see the fantastic work that they do there. It has great results. It is a fine and a growing institution. I've been closely involved with many of Petroc's initiatives, attending the graduation ceremonies, for instance, and sitting on the board of the Health and Social Care Academy, which is a great initiative that Petroc runs in conjunction with the local North Devon Healthcare Trust. So, in conclusion, Mr. Bone, whilst there are, we know, many competing demands on the government's finances, I know this minister does care deeply for the further education sector and fights very strongly for it. But I would not be doing my job if I did not reflect the very strong representations that I've received from Petroc College, which has been echoed by so many members and honourable and right honourable members across this chamber. The overall name for this campaign, I know, was Love Our Colleges. I know this minister does love our colleges. I ask her to spread that love a little more effectively, and particularly in the direction of North Devon.
Jim Fitzpatrick. I see you were presiding over our business this afternoon. I'm delighted to follow the honourable gentleman from North Devon. What's been striking in this debate, Mr Bowen, has been the consistency of message across the chamber, not just predictably from the opposition benches, but from the loyalists on the government benches, including the chair of a select committee, the chair of the all-party parliamentary group, previous Minister of State, a number of departments, and other colleagues who know the minister much better than I, and who speak of her commitment to further education. I hope she gets the message as strongly as has been delivered and takes it back to reinforce the work that she's doing in the department and reinforces the department's battle with Treasury to get the funding which is required. In respect to the briefings I've received, Mr Bowen, I'm grateful to Alison Arno of Tower Hamlets campus of New City College for her briefing on local impacts, to Vanessa Donoghue of the Sixth Form Colleges Association and the Raise the Rate campaign for the national effects, and the Commons Library as ever for their assistance. So there are three issues I'd like to mention briefly. The overall funding rate, the specific rate for 16 to 19-year-olds, and the staffing pay levels, all mentioned by colleagues pretty much in every single speech. On the overall level, funding for 16 to 19-year-olds in schools, sixth form colleges and FE colleges is allocated, as has been stated, by the Education and Skills Funding Agency, and was using a simple national funding formula. A new formula based on learner numbers has been used since 2013-14, replacing the old formula based broadly on the numbers of qualifications taken. Based on the figures in the ESFA account, expenditure for the 16 to 19-year-old education has experienced decreases of around 11% in cash terms and 21% in real terms between 2010-11 and 2015-16. The 2015 spending review settlement included a protection of the core adult skills participation budgets in cash terms at £1.5 billion. Prior to this, spending on the adult skills budget fell by 32% in cash terms between 2010 and 2015-16. On the specifics of 16 to 19-year-old spending, the library briefing reports that in its 2018 annual report on education spending, the IFS noted that spending per student in an FE or sixth form college is now about 8% lower than spending per pupil in secondary schools
having been about 50% greater at the start of the 1990s. It concluded that 16 to 18 education in England has been a big loser from education spending changes over the last 25 years, with spending falling faster during the 1990s, growing more slowly into the noughties, and being one of the few areas of education spending to see cuts in 2010. It goes on to report several underspends. Spending on 16 to 19 education was £135 million lower than forecast in 2014-15, and £132 million lower in 2015-16. In 2016-17, spending was £106 million lower than expected, meaning that 1.8% of the budget was not spent. Sector spokespersons have raised concerns about budget underspends at a time of funding reductions and have argued that the money should be used by the 16 to 19 sector and not redeployed to other ministerial priorities. And I'd be grateful if the Minister might be able to comment on that point in her wind-up. In Tower Hamlets, young people in my constituency and those of my honourable friend from Bethnal Green and Bow, the minimum funding for a secondary school place is about £1,500 above what New City College gets per learner. On staffing pay, the Library also states that the STRB's 2018-19 recommendations for pay and allowances was an uplift of 3.5%, but the grant, as we've heard, does not include further education and sixth form colleges. And this is while the average national pay differential between a school teacher and an FE teacher is around £5,000, nearer £7,000 in London, and there's an even wider gap in sought-after subjects like maths. The Minister will have seen the statistics published by Raise the Rate campaign and mentioned by honourable members in speeches. 50% of schools and colleges have dropped courses in modern foreign languages, 34% have dropped STEM courses, 67% have reduced student support services with significant cuts to mental health support, employability skills and career advice. And 77% are teaching pupils in larger class sizes, and I'd be grateful if the Minister might be able to comment on that also. In conclusion, Mr Bowen, less money per pupil in colleges than in sixth forms in schools, less pay for teachers in colleges than in schools, and overall funding for 16 to 19-year-olds and mature students is dropping overall in real terms. In February 2018, the Prime Minister announced that there would be a government-led review of post-18 education, which would be supported by an independent panel. The panel should be publishing its report at an interim stage, with government concluding the review this year. And I'd be grateful if the Minister could get us up to speed with the timetable for that. And I look forward to the front bench responses to the excellent contributions so far in this debate, Mr Bond.
Nick Dakin.
Thank my honourable friend for Cambridge for getting this debate off to such a good start, and to congratulate the students from Brockenhurst College for the work they did in making sure this debate came forward. We need to not only love our colleges, Mr Bone, we need to treasure them and invest in them. And that's what we need to do, because our colleges are at the heart of our communities. They are there with connections with industry and commerce, and they help power our communities. And they are also engines of social mobility. All the evidence shows that colleges, more than any other institution, transform social mobility. So for those reasons alone, we should be doing everything we can to support our colleges. With the raising of the participation age having taken place, it is absolutely nonsensical that a youngster in 16 to 18 should be funded at 23% less than a youngster at age 15. That just doesn't make sense at all, Mr Bone, and this debate draws attention to that. I'm really pleased to see the strength of opinion from across the House, that people know their colleges, MPs understand the importance of their colleges in their communities, and that message comes through loud and clear today to all of us. And I know the Minister really cares about colleges too, and is a passionate advocate for colleges, and we welcome that in her, but she does need to deliver. And it means that she needs to tell us when she responds, you know, where is the need to put this right, the underfunding of colleges, in the priorities that the Department for Education is pushing with the Treasury. You know, is it first, is it second, is it third, or is it 27th? because we need to be honest about this. I think people in this room would agree that it needs to be up there as a #1 priority for the department if it really cares about social mobility, if it really cares about delivering the skill agenda that we need as we leave the European Union. Because skills are central to that. One of the main concerns of all our people at the referendum was the issue to do with migrant labour. Now, if we're going to tackle that problem, we need to invest in skills. And who better to invest in those skills than our colleges? Because our colleges are what makes the difference. Now, for my pains, I've actually run a college for a number of years, which was a more challenging job than probably being a Member of Parliament. And what I look at now is compared to how the challenges that I was confronting in 2010, the challenges that principals face today are much greater. And they can only balance certain things. You can only manage certain variables, which is the curriculum, and people have talked about how the curriculum is shrinking, and that includes student support and enrichment, as well as the breadth of curriculum and the disappearance of STEM subjects and languages and so on. And we talk about the workload of teachers. Teachers are having to teach more periods, and so therefore they have larger classes, because the other variable is class sizes. There's only a certain number of variables you can play around with, which is class sizes, teacher workload, and curriculum. And all these things principals have handled and managed. And we are now coming to the point when it is near breaking point. And although we welcome the stuff that's going on with T-levels and additional support for maths, these are welcome, but T-levels won't come until 2022, so that's not affecting young people now. And the other things are small beer. We need to make sure that the rate is raised for the central people who are doing the work. Can I just, very quickly? Yep.
I thank my self-advocate for giving way, and just echo the comments that he's making and say on behalf of my colleges, Franklin College and the Grimsby Institute, that the points that he's making are absolutely right, and the additional cost burdens of things like GDPR that have not been factored in all add to those cost pressures of local
I thank my honourable friend, and of course the great colleges in my constituency, John Leggett College, which I was proud to lead, has contacted me this week and said that the staff pay increases would be a real challenge to the colleges, and if the pension increases remain unfunded, that will be the equivalent of 6 teacher posts. North Lindsey College also raised the issue of the support for apprenticeships. They have had a magnificent increase of apprenticeships by 30% this year, and to deliver the government's priority of apprenticeships, but are concerned about conversation that there may be a desire to cap the level of funding for apprenticeships, which would really damage the investment that's been put in that. And I would hope that the Minister, when she sums up, can give us reassurances that the apprenticeship strength and development will not be affected badly by changes in that respect. So we do need the rate to raise. We need to raise the rate, Mr Bone. We need to treasure our colleges, we need to invest in our colleges, we need to raise the rate, we need to recognise that they're a key part of our future.
Thank you for calling me in this very important debate, and thank you to the Petitions Committee for facilitating the debate, and my honourable friend, the member for Cambridge, for introducing it. I do apologise for my intermittent coughing, Mr Bourne. I'm afraid I've got Brexit fever. It's affected members in different ways, but I shall persevere and press on regardless. I do want to highlight some of the particular points that apply to my own college, East Durham College, and I thank the excellent principal there, Suzanne Duncan, and all the staff for their hard work and their dedication to the students in my constituency, and for giving me an insight into the funding issues my college faces, and indeed other FE colleges. I agree with many of the points that many honourable members have made, not just on this side of the committee, but all around the committee, about the unfair nature of funding. And I do hope the Minister is going to address these in her response. The funding cuts for East Durham College, like many other colleges, has meant real-term cuts in staff pay, fewer teaching hours for students, and bigger class sizes, and indeed less choice. And while the Department for Education has demanded more from teachers for the same funding, it has resulted in substantial additional workloads. And this is, as well as delivering work experience, maths and English GCSE resits, and the careers strategy obligations. I'm told that adult education funding is being cut by 45%. It's clear further education colleges are an essential part of England's education system, whether it's through top-class technical education, basic skills or lifelong learning. Colleges help people of all ages and backgrounds to make the most of their talents and abilities. My college, based in Peatley, is rooted in the local communities. Previously, it served the mining industry. It's developed and gone on. It's crucial, Minister, in driving social mobility and providing the skills boost to my local and indeed to the regional economies, to regional economy. It's fundamental and indeed an essential requirement in constituencies like mine that the college is properly funded. We've heard about the cuts from 2009 to 2019. College funding's being cut by around 30%. I did listen to the contributions from the Honourable Member for Yeovil and for Boston. I don't know whether they've experienced the same problems, but I mentioned we've got fewer hours of teaching, less support for young people, a drastic reduction in the number of learning opportunities for adults. We know that the value of staff pay has fallen by over 25%, and many members have pointed out that college teachers are earning £7,000 a year less than their colleagues teaching in schools. This situation is simply not sustainable and ultimately impacts on college students, on staff, on businesses, and indeed on the wider community. I also met with the lobby, Love Our Colleges, a coalition of trade unions, students, college leaders, people with a particular interest in the colleges. And I do hope the Minister will study the manifesto that they put forward. I don't want to, because of the shortage of time, go through that. But I do think that as a result of this government's policies of austerity, every part of the public sector is now asking for more money. Many have good cases to make, but the case for funding for post-16 education is quite simply that if we as a nation are going to fill this yawning and ever-widening skills gap, there's only so much that we can do with what little colleges currently receive. It's worth referring to last year's report from the IFS, which confirmed that the FE sector has been the worst hit by austerity more than any other part of the education sector. Spending on FE and adult education has fallen by almost £3.5 billion since 2010. My constituents are amongst many of the signatures. Several hundred from Easington have signed. I think that's an indication of the value we place on the college. I want to thank the students who launched the petition, and I do hope that the Minister can provide them with some comfort that FE providers are going to be properly funded and properly protected. And the Right Honourable Member for Guildford, the Minister, I really don't want her to be remembered as being the Minister responsible for kicking away the ladders of opportunity that many in this chamber took for granted when they were students. Education is an investment. I hope that the government will commit to ensuring that every student can receive a high quality and comprehensive education. Thank you.
Stephen Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Last Friday, I was talking to the principal of Portsmouth College, a college I had the privilege to attend. What he told me was seriously concerning, and I'm proud to be here today to speak up for that college. If we were to walk into a college in Canada, we would see sixth formers receiving 26 hours of tuition in a week. In Singapore, 27 hours. In Shanghai, 30 hours. What do we need to give our sixth formers? 15 hours of tuition per week. We owe our young people so much more. How can we expect our future generations to compete on a world stage when we are giving them far less than their counterparts across the globe? If we want this great nation's future to be bright as our past, we need to invest in our young people. Colleges educate nearly 65% of those that go on to higher education. located both geographically and symbolically at the heart of our communities. They are a driving force for social mobility. All of this is being put at risk. Over the last 10 years, colleges, as we've already heard, have had to deal with average funding cuts of 30% and soaring costs. The effects have been severe. Those who attend state-run colleges have 1/3 of what those at independent schools have spent on them. In the last 10 years, qualifications in health and social care have fallen by 70%, the same for engineering and plumbing. But perhaps most significantly, IT qualifications have fallen by almost 90%. And Mr. Bone, the consequences are dire for everyone in our country, not just our young people. Think of a world where we have hospitals, but no nurses, where we can no longer construct buildings like the Shard, Spinnaker Tower in Portsmouth, or the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol, where we can no longer protect this country from the ever-growing cybersecurity threats we face. Sound bleak? These are all very real scenarios if we do not increase spending on sixth form colleges. Amanda Spellman, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector, recently expressed her concern over the matter to the Public Accounts Committee, a committee I sit on. She said, "My strong view is that the government should use the forthcoming spending review to increase the base rate for 16 to 18-year funding." Again, it seemed the government had heard enough from experts, and they chose not to take her advice. Instead, the national base for 16 to 17-year-olds was fixed at £4,000 per student. Obviously, this rate does nothing to consider the inflationary pressures or cost increases that occur year on year for our colleges. So the solution to this problem is simple. We need to raise the funding rate from £4,000 per sixth form student. Failure to do so will mean greater reductions in young people realising their dreams. It will dramatically affect the economy and undermine our nation's capability in a global market. This small increase in funding will have an immeasurable effect on the nation's future and is a minor price to pay for financial security of our nation. I am not alone in my request for this government to increase its funding. It's what the staff of colleges like Portsmouth College are telling me. But also Her Majesty's Chief Inspector has said it is essential. College principals from around the country have come forward in support of a fantastic petition, and Mr. Bone have signed a petition calling for it. We need to safeguard the future of our country and our young people. We need to raise the rate for fantastic colleges like Portsmouth College.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bone. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Pretty much all of what I was going to say has been said, but in the great tradition of this place, I'm going to say it anyway. I want to start by, by pointing out my constituency is serviced by 3 wonderful and excellent colleges. Stoke Sixth Form College under the leadership of Mark Kent, Stoke-on-Trent College under the leadership of Denise Brown, and and Newcastle College in the neighbouring constituency under Karen Dobson. All 3 of those colleges provide what is essentially the basic parts of the social mobility engine in North Staffordshire. If it wasn't for those colleges, then young people across my constituency, across North Staffordshire, would find their options very limited. And some of the finest minds in North Staffordshire have been through those colleges, not least the Minister's PPS, who was a pupil and a student at the Sixth Form College. But what they also do, as well as providing a first-class education for the young people in my constituency, is they provide a whole host of life skills, a whole host of support skills, which isn't reflected in the current level of funding. And if the Minister, when she is able to have the arguments, again with Treasury over the rate, can factor this in. It's not just about how much we spend per pupil for their education, it's about the other things that colleges provide that aren't accounted for anywhere else in the budgets. The Sixth Form College in the middle of my constituency essentially has an extension of a social work practice. It deals with the trials and tribulations of almost all of the pupils that are there in a community which has community cohesion issues, that has deprivation issues, that have parents that struggle with literacy and numeracy in society, that have young mums with children. They provide a safety net for a whole host of people who otherwise would not be able to access education. The areas where I think we are struggling in North Staffordshire in particular is around the mental health provision. The Vice Principal of the Sixth Form College, Claire Gagan, told me that in one term, one year of the college, there were 70 referrals to the local CAM system, 70. But in that same period of time, only one appointment was received. That's 69 young people who are not getting access to the mental health services and support that they need. Now, I know that is not something that the Minister can fix overnight, and I know that is not something that the Minister will not take seriously. But it is the reality of our situation that too many young people in our colleges need additional supports that simply are not there and not being met. Earlier on, Mr Bone, I pointed out that had the level of funding since the freeze have taken place, there would be an additional £308 per pupil being spent in colleges across this country. There are, I'm told by the House of Commons Library, around 8,500 young people between 16 and 18 in Stoke-on-Trent. Quick bit of maths, that's around £2.5 million. That would be £2.5 million across 3 colleges in North Staffordshire that would go a very long way to making a big difference to the life chances of the young people that I represent. But what I fear is happening, Mr Bone, is we are getting to the point of it being a zero-sum game. We had a lot of talk from lots of members this afternoon about the pay of teachers and the funding for high schools and for further education. But the reality is we shouldn't be pitting the funding from up to 15 with that of 16 to 18. We certainly shouldn't be trying to level down. This should be about levelling up. It should be recognising that if colleges are well funded, then universities will have good quality applicants to go forward to take on high quality graduate jobs. If colleges are well funded, the skills gaps that we face in our communities, particularly in communities like Stoke-on-Trent, can be met with ease. And if we have well funded colleges, we will attract the best and the brightest staff who in turn will inspire that next generation to go on and do the jobs that we know are so important. Stoke-on-Trent, Mr Bone, is a city that is rich in talent and rich in aspiration, but it struggles sometimes to turn that talent and aspiration into tangible outcomes. And the work that is done by the colleges in my constituency are one of the few places where you can see that being nurtured. And I see, when I visit them, as I'm sure every member who visits their college, they'll see bright young faces who have met that inspirational teacher, that inspirational leader, who has helped them go that next step towards achieving something great for themselves, for their families. And all too often, Mr Bone, in my constituency, access to further education is normally can be generational. For the young people that are going to college now, it will be a break with things that have come before them. It will be a chance to go on and do better than their parents, do better than their grandparents. And often, they come back and they inspire the next generation. I have met far too many young people who have only gone on to do further education qualifications at a more challenging level because they've had a brother or a sister that have gone through that programme, who have seen what their brothers and sisters can achieve, what their cousins can achieve, and have felt to emulate and replicate that. And I think the more we can do to stimulate that sort of interaction, the better we can be in providing a college system that works. But that does come with funding. And as my honourable friend, I think from Scunthorpe said, we need to love our colleges. We need to spread that love more, but what we can't do is spread that love more thinly. There simply has to be more love to go around. And I just want to end by saying, Mr Bone, that if we are investing in our colleges, this is about investing in our future and for our young people, but it's also about investing in the future of our country. And I know the Minister takes it seriously. I know from the responses that I have had to questions that I've raised in education questions that she knows this is a battle that needs to be had with the Treasury. But I want to say, Mr Bone, that I think all of us that are here today are ready to stand with her as she has that battle for the funding that we need.
Emma Hardy.
Thank you very much, Mr Bone. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I feel that we can, at this moment, achieve something that perhaps is unachievable in every other issue and in other areas of the House right now, and that's a little bit of consensus and a little bit of cross-party working, and perhaps this will set as a very good example to maybe some other honourable members and right honourable members out there, because it is indeed achievable, because everyone's contribution so far has been so supportive of FE, and in the grand tradition, which my honourable friend mentioned, every argument has been made. We've all heard the powerful and persuasive reasons why FE matters so much, so I won't sort of use every moment I have just to repeat them all, but I do think that there is an argument that perhaps hasn't been mentioned quite as much, because people have talked powerfully about the skills shortage and the need to address this, and in a moment I'll mention the particular difficulties around the NHS 10-year plan and the problems of implementing that. But there's something else that colleges do, another role that they have, which is being completely downplayed, and that's the role as being kind of the heart of the community. And actually, for some people, especially people like adults with learning difficulties, it's a social place as well. And sometimes for adults who may be struggling a little bit with their mental health, or people whose lives haven't worked out the way all of us would like for them, it offers that little bit of social interaction, a place to go, a purpose to get up in the morning. And I've heard this from constituents myself who've been struggling with their mental health, but they wanted to go and complete their course. And this other really nice gentleman who has some learning difficulties, who loves to show me, whenever I see him, all his certificates that he carries around in his backpack, because he's so very, very proud of them. And I know that the college are often just finding reasons to allow him to keep going, because he has such a wonderful time there, and it is a social event for him. And I would just sort of put to the Minister that, yes, the arguments for skills are absolutely pivotal, but let's also have an argument for colleges being part of the community and recognise that for some, is it really so bad for society that it's actually a social place where people can go and interact with others? And could we maybe look at the funding streams to address this? Because it feels at the moment, if you're not going to get a qualification at the end of it, then you're not getting the funding for your course. Yes?
Great to hear her say that, because the case she's making is the case for continuing learning, lifelong learning, community learning, learning that doesn't necessarily have an economic purpose. But politicians have become so insecure, so emasculated, that they're very reluctant to make a case for things that can't be measured in precise terms. She's making a case for joy, and education should be about joy, and that's why it's such a tragedy that adult community learning has declined since the days when the Honourable Member for Twickenham and I defended its budget.
Emma Hardy.
I completely agree with the Right Honourable Member, because it has. I know for myself, my friend of mine who, after giving birth and wanted a reason to get out the house and just not have the baby for a while, managed to sign me and her up for salsa classes, which I was quite disappointed in, because being the taller one, I had to be the bloke, so now I can salsa, but only as the male role in the pair. But this was something that she did following giving birth, wanting to get out the house and wanting to find something else to do. And we're losing that. I fear we're really losing that role for colleges. And just to return to the point, I do want to make this point about the NHS and the skills shortage, because the 10-year plan for the NHS is of course welcome. But I was reading a report from the Royal College of Nursing, and the director there said that this report confirms our greatest fear, that the impressive ambition of the long-term plan could be derailed simply because we do not have the nursing staff to deliver it. And the Minister might be expecting me now to make a plug for the fact that Hull College have set up a nursing apprenticeship. And the reason why I keep going on about this, and I think it really is exciting in a different debate at a different time with pretty much the same people, I spoke about the need for that progression from a level 2 right through to a degree apprenticeship, and the need for that to be clearly defined and mapped out so that each individual can see how one moves onto another. And with Hull College, this is exactly what they've done. They've taken people at 16 from a level 2 in health and social care and given them that pathway right through to a nursing degree apprenticeship. And this is something I mentioned to the Minister before, that we need to have that clear pathway, that progression between 2 and 3 and 4, all the way up, all the way mapped out. And I just want to also mention, on the Education Select Committee, we had a visit to Germany, and we were looking at lifelong learning. And quite a few people have mentioned the challenges of automation, which is both a challenge and something to be really excited about as well. But it does present those problems around lifelong learning, and how are we going to upskill people in this country. And Germany are already starting to do this, and they call this Industry 4.0, and this is happening right across the country. And I feel like we're already quite far behind on how far they've moved on with this. And the worry is we do not want to be a country that is left even further behind, especially after Brexit. Yes?
We're very proud that we work together on the education lessons. She's making one of the best speeches of the afternoon. It's particularly about the importance of FE as social capital, because when you often in strong areas of economic that have very little economic capital, if you weaken FE colleges, you destroy the community. But what she says about Germany is incredibly important, because she will recognise that 50% of German students go off to do further education, technical education, and 70% of Swiss students, because we went to both places. And are those not examples of countries and governments that are investing in FE, that it is has the same equality as academic education, and it's something that we should follow strongly, examples that we could follow strongly as a country?
Emma Hardy.
It'll come no surprise to the honourable member that I completely agree with him and I share his passion for this. And one of the points I made in the previous debate was if we want this parity of esteem, then we need the parity of outcome. And what Germany's model has is no dead ends. So that if you start off on a vocational route, you can move across, you can move between vocational and academic and back to vocational again. You can get to that degree level if you want to through a vocational route, which is why I have mentioned before to the Minister, where unfortunately we disagree, is that I feel like T-levels are a distraction from this. And so I'll conclude by saying, of course I support raise the rate. It's crucially important that we have more money for our pupils. And of course, I'm very, very proud that the Labour Party has a National Education Service vision, which is a really inspiring vision for everybody to get behind. And I just want to put on record my thanks to all the staff at Hull College, all the staff at Wyke Sixth Form College, which is the one I went to, so I especially like that one, for all of the hard work and everything they do for all of the pupils in Hull. And just to go back to my original point, to implore the Minister that, yes, skills, progression, future matters, but so does actually a sense of belonging and a sense of community, which is the other thing that FE gives.
Catherine West.
Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in this petitions debate. And could I also congratulate not just the Honourable Lady from Kingston upon Hull and Hessel, who's given an excellent speech just now, but also the member for Cambridge who introduced this important debate. And there's no doubt that if we spent a little more time on spending on FE, then we'd be less worried about loneliness, which is one of our current concerns in policy terms. Mr. Bone, it's true to say that there's no such thing as a job for life, and with those of us with possibly an election in the air, there's nothing more dear to our hearts than a sense that it might not be a job for life for MPs either. And who knows, we might end up at our FE college seeking some extra courses ourselves in not so distant a time. Could I briefly make, Mr. Bone, a link in with the poor retention of apprenticeships, which we see and have seen for several years now. We all know the importance and how crucial it is to get the apprenticeship work stream right, and to date we haven't had that. But the Honourable Lady from Kingston upon Hull and Hessel mentioned the importance of making clear the pathway from the beginning of the course so that the student can see what happens at the end of the course, and so that we could see more students retained in apprenticeships. Could I also say, Mr. Bone, what a pleasure it is to have some students with us today here in Westminster Hall. And also to, of course, put on record my thanks for Kurt Hines, who's the principal at the College of Haringey, Enfield and North London, which now is part of a consortium of 3 or 4 other colleges, and which is the largest FE provider in London. And that has brought pluses and minuses to the teaching within North London. Personally, I think the college achieved more before when it was able to focus on a smaller population group, but obviously we are where we are. And I have had a number of teachers come to see me, particularly last autumn when the UCU organised a parliamentary tour to see MPs. And I had one English as a second language teacher who's incredibly committed to what she teaches. But she was pointing out to me that for your average teacher who is paid $37,000 in the secondary school, she is only paid $30,000. And I think many members have made the case here that we need to raise the rate and we need to make sure that that discrepancy is cancelled out. Secondly, on the point of students, some members have made the point, but a 67% drop in the welfare work stream and extracurricular and arts and music does lead to a much diminished offer for students. And in particular, I've seen from my own casework just how much work the welfare officers within the college play and how they keep students at college and how that's crucial to the mental health of the students.
Just on that very point, someone who attended an FE college, and an FE college saved my life. Struggling in the chemical industry, lost my way, went to a FE college, it saved my life and my career. And the welfare and the support I got of someone, mature student transferring was wonderful. And I just want that for every student in every FE college with the heart of our skills empire in this country.
Catherine West.
The member for Huddersfield has repaid that debt to the college sector by committing himself to lifelong learning, to apprenticeships, and the importance of learning in terms of our industrial strategy and particularly in terms of towns and the important work that the colleges do within many pockets of deprived areas, particularly in England. Could I also make the link, Mr Bone, with gender and BAME pay gap? Because if you're not getting a strong offer in college, then you're likely to be entering the workforce at a lower pay, and that surely has something to do with the fact that so many women and so many black and ethnic minority members of our workforce are paid less, and surely that is something which the department should be looking into and rectifying. Furthermore, could I say also on the question of STEM, and some members have raised that this afternoon, the science, technology, engineering and maths, that the 24% drop in the STEM offer within the college sector is a terrible step backwards. And what's being done, for example, in public procurement, we know that we have Crossrail, the Super Sewers project, HS2 and a number of public procurement projects. What is happening to tie up the sector with those huge public procurement projects? Couldn't some of that money be spent within the colleges to make these links and to make sure that when one of these big projects finishes, like, for example, the Thames Tideway Tunnel, can't that tunnelling expertise then be lent to another high-value, expensive public procurement exercise elsewhere? Mr Bone, I'll leave it there. I know there are other members who want to make points, but just to say that we must redouble our efforts as members as well to continue to put pressure on the Treasury so that we can join with the Minister, who I know is committed to this area, and with the Chair of the Select Committee and other members to really make the case for lifelong learning. Thank you, Mr Bone.
Toby Perkins.
Very much, Mr. Bone. It's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to start by congratulating the petitioners who have got this petition going, and every one of the 70,000 people who've signed it. It really does show that when people get behind our further education sector, it can have an impact here, and the quality and number of people contributing to this debate says all about that. I'd like to start by talking about the impact that further education has had in my family. My son has recently completed his second year exams, midterm exams at Hull University. But when he left school at the age of 16, no one would have expected that he was going on to university, and it is really the contribution that the further education sector and Chesterfield College specifically made to him that he is now going on and doing very well at university. And I think that many of us have recognised that there are a lot of children that don't do well at school, and that further education can play a transformative impact on those children. I'm very worried that our education system is becoming a one-chance saloon for for children. We all know that adolescents can go through all kinds of different crises, and it is so important that they have that opportunity to have a second chance. And Chesterfield College play an incredibly important role in my community, not just as in terms of the services that they provide for people at a whole variety of levels, to the 10,000 people who attend Chesterfield College. They play an incredibly important role in the community, also as an employer, as a customer to other Chesterfield businesses. Chesterfield College needs that support. And they also played the crucial role of being the provider of my Christmas card this year, which is something I'm sure everyone who received it will never have forgotten about. So further education plays an important role for those children who haven't done so well at school but have huge potential in academic study after that love of learning is developed by the further education sector. It also provides an important service for those children who did do well at school but want a different kind of study. It provides a kind of education which offers more freedom, much more like the university experience. It provides an incredibly important role for those children who want to pursue non-academic study and the development of those skills. It provides an incredibly important role for many children. I will briefly, yes.
he makes a very powerful point. I was a secondary school teacher, and I believe the focus on university education impacts so much on our whole school system that actually, if we looked at much more parity, it would actually positively impact on the way how we teach in Key Stage 3 and 4 to make it far more interesting for a vast number of young people.
David Perkins.
Well, I agree with the honourable lady entirely. I think that a diverse education system is incredibly important for any country that wants to be competitive in the global race, and I'm very worried that we're leaving far too many people behind, and I think that's the point that she's making. I think that further education plays an incredibly important role in terms of many people with special educational needs who leave school but aren't yet ready for the world of work, want to develop their skills. It's so important that we don't just see education purely about the jobs that people subsequently do, but also about developing people in a whole variety of ways. And that also speaks to the role that further education plays in terms of supporting people who are recovering from a crisis. And the honourable gentleman from South Holland spoke about that. But often that move into the further education, doing a course, is a step towards the world of work. It might be a flower arranging course, it might be first aid, it might be any number of things that don't end up being a job at that moment, but actually it's a starting point for people who are at a moment in their lives where they need to have something to give them a sense of hope. And of course it's so important in terms of people looking to boost their skills to accelerate their career development. And further education colleges also play a core role in ensuring that there is a provider there to provide apprenticeship starts, particularly in the small business sector that don't have all the skills that our major employers have. And I'm very worried that much of the progress that was made in the last 12 or 15 years on apprenticeships is being lost because of the apprenticeship reforms. Apprenticeships aren't just about the Rolls-Royces of this world, and colleges played an important role to allow apprenticeships to happen in our small business sector. And I'm also very worried, as people have spoken previously, about the huge number of experienced lecturers who are leaving the sector. I heard from the honourable gentleman from Eastbourne, 25,000 have left the profession. That's a huge amount of dedicated, skilled, experienced people who we've lost to this crucial sector. So this debate today is about love our colleges. We've had the call and we've heard from people, members of Parliament right across the chamber, that we all love our colleges, but it's important that the government actually give some meaning to those words and ensure that the money backs that love. So we can all speak about the importance of further education, but it's important when the Minister gets to her feet, she actually shows the government are willing to show that love with some cold, hard cash.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. It's always a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. And could I thank my honourable friend, the member for Cambridge, for introducing this debate, which is so important. Now, I should begin by saying a word about my own background. When I first left school, I served an engineering apprenticeship some years ago now, so I hope nobody expects me to do any feats of engineering. But the crucial thing about the training system at that time, and it wasn't perfect, far from it, was that you got the on-the-job training in the workplace, and secondly, you got the, if you like, academic side of things, or certainly the technical side of things, on daily lease to college, which I had the benefit of throughout my apprenticeship. And the great thing about college, if you worked in a small workplace, a relatively small workplace as I did, you only got a very narrow range of skills, because there are only so many things in one place there is to learn. And that was augmented. You got transferable skills by going to college and taking the various qualifications that were available. And I do think it's important that we always bear that in mind. Otherwise, what you train people to do is to work in the one workplace with no prospect of ever moving on to another one. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the statistics that people have already quoted at length, because time would forbid me from doing so. But one thing I would like to say is that we do know from all sides of the debate today, that we've seen the number of apprenticeships falling, and we've seen the amount of funding colleges get per pupil and overall falling over the last 10 years or so. That can't be right. One other point I did want to make, that I've had some briefing from Knowsley Community College, St Helens and Knowsley Community College as it is now, and Liverpool Community College, and they tell me that the apprenticeship system for them is so unnecessarily complicated that it really gives them a headache. And Liverpool Community College tell me that they have to deal for apprenticeships with 14 different funding pots. Now that is just ridiculous, Mr. Bone, and I would say to the Minister, I hope she will look at that problem and try to find some way of short-circuiting that complicated funding problem. I just want to briefly refer, before I finish, to points that have been made already by my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, my honourable friend for Kingston upon Hill, and it seems much else besides, and my honourable friend for Hornsey and Wood Green. I think there is a problem, and colleges are reporting huge increases in mental health problems that they have to deal with. Those statistics have already been quoted. Colleges need to be able to help people with mental health problems to get the training or education they need. But in order to do that, they need the resources. And in the context of constantly diminishing resources, they just don't have the capacity to do the sort of work that's necessary. So I do think it's been a good debate, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to have taken part in it. I just hope when the Minister does come to reply, she will address the funding problem that has been mentioned right across the board. I do hope she'll look at simplifying the apprenticeship funding system, and I do hope that she'll take into account the comments that have been made on mental health problems.
Serve under your chairmanship, and I also congratulate the member for the my honourable friend from for Cambridge for bringing this petition committee debate today. Members across this debate have made many points, so I'll try not to repeat them. Mr. Bone, on her first day, the Prime Minister promised to tackle the burning injustices of society, with the implication that everyone in Britain, from whatever background and whatever age, was going to be able to succeed. Well, here today, we're confronted with another example of deed not following word, the cuts to our further education system. Now, in December, Mr. Bone, I visited West Thames College in Isleworth, in my constituency. It was largely rebuilt thanks to the decision of the Labour government agreed in 2010, and now has amazing student and technical facilities from that major capital build. The college provides a wide variety of courses, from world-renowned specialist hair and makeup degrees, whose graduates get jobs in the West End and in the film and TV industry, a range of vocational courses designed in conjunction with local employers, such as in aviation and logistics, where we have a local skill shortage. English as an additional language courses to enable young people who've arrived in the country recently the ability to progress in education and employment, and specialist support, both for those needing additional support to access mainstream courses and specialist courses for students with severe or complex disabilities. There's also a programme for 14 to 16-year-olds who haven't coped in school for various reasons, such as for health or family problems. Now, when I visited in early December, I met a number of students on a variety of different courses. Students such as Paige and Rosie, aged 18, each struggled for different reasons when younger, so they missed a lot of school. But West Thames is now providing them with a focus for both catching up on their core skills and also giving them career hopes. Paige in bridal hair and Rosie in car mechanics. I met 32-year-old Katrina doing an access to social work degree course. She wants to access a degree course in social work. She's the lone parent of a disabled child and has struggled to get a career to date, or even at times a job. She told me how the course will enable her to apply to university and hopefully become her dream, a professional social worker. Uplifting as these stories are, Mr. Bone, the students on the different courses raised concerns with me that they'd experienced recently. Cuts in teaching hours needed to cover the breadth of the curriculum on their courses. Cuts in courses such as employability, which are so important to help them get a job. Concerns about the provision of up-to-date specialist equipment and software, which are changing all the time, to keep, and the college needs to keep up with the changing needs of employers. Overstretched special needs and mental health support. The decimation, and also the college is suffering from the decimation in adult learning, and fewer adults are able to attend the college.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I was lucky to benefit back in 2008 from retraining through adult education. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the great benefit of further education is the richness, the breadth that it can provide, the diversity of courses that you can't get anywhere else, and the 30% cuts like we're seeing at Warwickshire College Group in Warwickshire, which has 29,000 students, that is such a huge benefit across Warwickshire.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because the decimation of adult courses has partly been brought about with the ending of student support for over 19-year-olds. The students and colleges are dealing with this cliff edge that ends when students reach 19, and aviation and ICT course students told me that over half the students left at the end of level 2 because they no longer got funding. So they therefore missed out on level 3. And it's level 3 that's the best gateway into jobs. Mr. Bone, West Thames College, like many other colleges, has lost 30% of its funding in the last 10 years, while costs, as other members have said, are rising. Students told me how they respected their students greatly and couldn't understand how they earned £7,000 less than equivalently experienced school teachers. West Thames's principal, Tracy Orst, made it quite clear to me that this situation, with all of these problems, is not sustainable and ultimately impacts not only on students, but staff, businesses, our communities, and our wider economy. So, Mr. Bone, how can the government party members opposite wring their hands today about UK productivity and then oversee the decimation of the education and skills training that is fundamental to that productivity that this country so badly needs? How can they wax lyrical about social mobility and then withdraw or underfund the options that enable people to aspire and achieve?
In Greenwood.
Mr. Bone, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and to hear so many excellent contributions in today's debate. It's no secret that this government is presiding over rising inequality in education. All 26 schools in my constituency face real terms cuts to their budgets, university tuition fees have risen threefold, and maintenance grants and education maintenance allowance have been scrapped, hitting students from the poorest and most deprived households the hardest. Colleges are a beacon of hope and opportunity in our local communities. As John van der Laarschot, the CEO of Nottingham College, says, rooted in local communities and with broad and deep links to local employers, further education colleges like ours help people of all ages and backgrounds to make the most of their talents and ambitions through top-class technical education, basic skills and lifelong learning. We play a crucial role in driving social mobility and boost local and regional economic competitiveness. Yet they're dealing with sustained underinvestment, which is nothing short of a financial crisis. Recently, the Institute of Fiscal Studies crowned further education the biggest loser in education over the last 25 years. And no wonder, as their research has revealed that since 2009, college funding has fallen by 30%, whilst funding for a sixth form student has fallen by 21% since 2010-11. And of course, we may soon say goodbye to European funding, which often helps colleges over the line. Mr. Chairman, this is happening at a time when colleges' costs have increased substantially, but has already been recognised, the 16 to 18 budget has been frozen by this government for 7 consecutive years at £4,000 per student. According to a recent report by the Children's Commissioner, by the end of this decade, as a country, we'll be spending the same amount of cash
per 16 to 18 student as we were in 1990. That simply cannot be right, especially when we know that the years from 16 to 18 are such a critical time in young people's lives, when they often need the most support. They face multiple pressures, sitting, perhaps even resitting some of the most important exams of their lives, deciding whether to apply to university or seek an apprenticeship, getting to grips with adulthood and making choices that will often shape their whole future. Too many students of this age are facing mental health problems, but a survey by Raise the Rate campaign has found that many colleges are having to make significant cuts to mental health support just when it is most needed. The continuing budget freeze teamed with rising costs means that ultimately colleges are being asked to do more with less. Nottingham College is currently working with a total income of £86.8 million, a 26% reduction since 2012-13. In the last year alone, they've rationalised sites and closed an on-site nursery provision. And of course, this isn't just happening in my constituency, as we've heard. College students all over the country are facing less choice in the curriculum that's on offer, reductions in teaching and learning support, and they're often unable to access the same extracurricular activities, work experience opportunities and university visits as their peers in private and selective schools. Adult further education, which plays a vital role in increasing social mobility, is also dependent on the success of our colleges. But funding has fallen by 45% in 9 years, and enrolments of adult students have dropped from 5.1 million to just 1.9 million over the same period. Learning is not just for the young, Mr. Bone, it's something for all of us, and we should be able to access it throughout our lives. As the nature of work changes, we need to be ready to reskill, to retrain, to adapt to new technologies and to take up new opportunities. The government says it's committed to increasing social mobility, yet funding for vocational and adult education has been decimated. Gone are the days, we've already heard, of taking an evening class at a local college after work. The second chances, those life-changing, lifelong learning courses are being destroyed. And as has already been recognised, this not only makes people's lives less fulfilling, in many cases it just makes them less fun. Mr. Chairman, it's not just college students and potential learners who are affected by the lack of funding. Since 2009, college staff have seen their pay fall by 25%. And according to the UCU, teachers in further education colleges earn on average £7,000 a year less than teachers in schools, often for the same work. It's no wonder, therefore, they've been leaving the further education sector in their droves. Since 2010, 24,000 have left, a third of the total teaching workforce. And in Nottingham College alone, there's been a 34% reduction in teaching staff since 2012-13, from 937 down to 616. Hard-pressed staff simply cannot be expected to continue doing more for less. Mr. Bone, I'm proud to speak today on behalf of Nottingham College's 40,000 students and 1,500 staff. There is, of course, some really good news. A new city hub campus will provide excellent learning facilities and transform a brownfield city centre site. But we are asking the Minister to also increase funding to sustainable levels. Will she give a guarantee of real terms funding rises for the coming 5 years? Will she commit to extending the pupil premium to cover post-16 students? Will she ensure that everyone can access lifelong learning, particularly those who haven't achieved a level 3 qualification? And will she ensure that colleges can offer their staff a decent pay deal this year and in the years ahead? We in this room all love our colleges. I hope that our colleges love the Minister's reply.
Paul Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. I wasn't intending to speak because I was a long time in the chamber for the Prime Minister's Brexit statement, so thank you for giving me the opportunity. And it's a perfect segue because the Chief Executive of Nottingham College, John van der Laarschot, used to be the Chief Executive of Stoke-on-Trent City Council. Next to me, he's a good man and I count him as a friend. The Minister will know well from correspondence that we've had over the last year that we've got an excellent college in Newcastle-under-Lyme. I hope she'll visit us sometime soon. Its principal, Karen Dobson, was awarded an OBE in recognition of her efforts and that of her team in the New Year's Honours List. And I played my part in getting a £5 million contribution from the old Advantage West Midlands to make the construction happen, because there was no better argument for investment in regeneration than investment in people's futures and in their further education. I just want to make one wider point with the Select Committee Chair here as well, to the Minister, Mr Bone. In Newcastle, since the reorganisation in the 1980s, there's only one school, St John Fisher, a Catholic school, which has a sixth form. Everybody else goes to the college, more or less. And so, excellent though it is, it's not simply a matter of choice. So my plea, Mr Bone, to the Minister, is that be it on pupil funding or on teachers' pay, the playing field between school sixth forms and FE colleges simply must be levelled. Not only is it unfair to pupils and teachers, it discriminates against areas like mine in North Staffordshire, Newcastle and Stoke-on-Trent, which have a different school-college structure. And I hope in the coming days, weeks and months, as she goes to bat in the Treasury, that her PPS, the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South, will be pursuing that argument with her vigorously too.
Very good point.
Thank you very much, Mr Bowen. Can I say it's an enormous pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and also your predecessor in this debate, Mr Walker. And it's been an absolute joy to echo what the Honourable Member for South Holland and Deeping said, to be in this debate and to hear the unanimity of view about what needs to be going on in this sector. And the Minister has positively been showered with an absolute avalanche of statistics, but more important possibly even than that, with the life-enhancing chances that further education and skills can bring forward. And that's been done today with an eloquency and an urgency that demands not simply her response, and I'm sure it will be a good one, but the response of the Secretary of State for Education. Because it's the Secretary for State for Education who needs to put his shoulder to the wheel in these discussions with the Treasury. And the Minister, I know, will do her best in that area. But if he doesn't get that money through, and if the Chancellor does not come back and respond to the abject failure in his budget, then none of them will be forgiven. And that is the crux of what we've been talking about today. And I don't have the ability simply to give a voice to praising all of the speeches today. I do certainly want to praise the 70,000 people who have signed this petition, and I want to praise all the excellent briefings from the Association of Colleges, the Sixth Form College Association, from Unison, from UCU, and also from all the individual principals and colleges and staff, and the so many individual students who members across this House have quoted today. And I want to also pay particular tribute to my friend and colleague, the member for Cambridge, who actually spelt out in simple, cogent and thoughtful terms the challenge to the Minister, the challenge of a divided country left behind, the challenge to make this a newsworthy crusade, which it has not been in the past, and the challenge simply to understand and to question, why has this happened? Why is it that when the EMA was abolished in 2010, there was £555 a year being spent, and now we have 16 to 19 bursaries, only a third of that value? Why is it, as the member for Tottenham said, that the concept of night schools has been left behind? Why is it that this funding has been frozen at £4,000? And those are all issues not that have just dropped into the Minister's tray, but have been in the tray of the 4 skills ministers that I have shadowed since 2011 in this area. And as I say, I can't touch on everything everybody's said, but the honourable friend for the member for Leeds North West talked to the issues about the T-levels, and so many other people have said the same, and today I have no ability, because of the time, to talk about, not about attacking T-levels, but to say that actually they are doing a very different job. And actually, even that job is being hampered by a whole range of a whole series of things. The Honourable Member for Harlow, the respected chair of the Select Committee, was absolutely right to talk about the different ages at which people get second chances and challenging the government on building new colleges. I absolutely agree. What is the point of building new colleges or new institutes of this, that and the other if you do not have the staff to take those courses through, if you do not have the funding to sustain them? That is the challenge for the government. And it needs a long-term strategy. By goodness, it needs a long-term strategy in the 10-year plan. And my honourable friend, the member for Crewe and Nantwich, who gave an absolutely fantastic speech, lauding her own FE college, but also pointing out the dire problems for smaller towns. And she was absolutely right to talk about the very tragic situation with Manchester Metropolitan there, which has been shared by so many people in this chamber here today. So those are things that the Minister has to focus on and the Department has to focus on, as well as the 24,000 FE teachers who've left the sector, as my honourable friends have said. The honourable member for South Holland and the Deepings, who I'm proud to count as a fellow collaborator in the joy of further education, is absolutely right to point out that the role of adult learning is now in jeopardy because of the sheer volume of funding cuts there have been. The honourable gentleman, the member for Eastbourne, talked about the yawning gap between school and FE teachers funding. My honourable friend, the member for Makerfield, again talked about the importance of Winstanley College in her constituency. And when she did that, it reminded me, of course, that it's called Winstanley College because it's named after Gerard Winstanley, who was one of the diggers. And the diggers and the levellers, Thomas Rainbow said to Cromwell that the poorest he, sorry about the sexism from the 17th century, but the poorest he should have the same opportunities as the greatest he. And that is the watchword of further education and skills, that time after time, people should be allowed to have this opportunity. My honourable friend, the member for Poplar and Limehouse, put his finger on the button when he talked about the message needing to go to the Secretary of State and to the Treasury, to the underspend on 16 to 19 education, and also on advanced learning loans. One of the tragedies of this government is that not just have they not been putting money in the right places, but they've introduced systems and structures like the advanced learning loans, which have, year after year, had 50% of that money returned to the Treasury, and nothing has been done about it. And that is one of the real problems in this area. My honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent, talked about how valuable it was to the North Staffordshire economy. My honourable friend, who serves so strongly on the Select Committee, talked about the social capital in that area. And my honourable friend, member Horns in Wood Green, and indeed the member for Huddersfield, the member for Chesterfield, the member for Knowsley, who talked about the overcomplex system. My colleague and friend, the member for Brentford and Isleworth, who quite rightly pointed to the achievements of the past Labour government in this area and how those have not been replicated so far. And obviously the two last contributions, and particularly the praising by my colleague from Newcastle upon Lyme of his principle, but also the honourable member for Nottingham, who summed it up that it's a beacon of hope and opportunity. And those are the sorts of questions that come to this table. And it's sad that we're having to revisit these views, these voices of challenge and hope, because we were all led to believe, and the Minister perfectly in good faith said, that this unprecedented campaign in the autumn would produce a result. And that was why in October last year I wrote to the Chancellor to request an urgent uplift in that area.
The Minister, but there is a division in the House. We will suspend for 15 minutes if it's one division. If it's more than one division, can we get back as soon as possible after those divisions? Order. Order, order. The debate will resume with the Shadow Minister, and we will now conclude at 19:55. Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. And as I was saying, these cuts have been very severe. In adult education, in further, there's been a real cut of anything between 50–60% in the budget, in further education, and of course, as in sixth form funding, which is why, of course, the Raise the Rate campaign has been doing what it's been doing. And the truth of the matter is, with all of these things, as Amanda Spielman said, I am firmly of the view the government should increase the base rate for 16 to 19 funding in the forthcoming spending review. And we've got to go down that route. We really do have to go down that route. We cannot have a repetition of being marched up to the top of the hill and down again, as we were with the situation with the Chancellor. And there were so many aspects of tonight which I could talk about, but haven't got the time to do so. But what I want to ask the Minister particularly is the Auger review. Is she going to do anything to make sure that the Auger review rebalances the rates between students and FE and HE, and will that be a priority in the spending review? We know also about the issues in terms of the financial health of colleges, and what is she going to be doing in that area in terms of insolvency issues. We know that policymakers have not looked holistically at this whole area. I just want to say in conclusion, Mr. Bone, that actually what we need to do is to have that holistic approach. And because this government has failed to have that holistic approach, because it hasn't looked at human capital as well as physical capital, because the advanced learning loans have been a continuing disaster, we need to have a transformation. We need to have parity of esteem. That can only be done by the sort of structures that we are proposing with the National Education Service and the Lifelong Learning Commission. And from my 20 years as a teacher, a lecturer in adult learning, and seeing the powerful effect of FE in my own college in Blackpool, I believe that there is no better way of dealing with this issue by having that step change, not just of funding, but of vision and of structure.
And it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Cambridge on securing this important debate, and also particular congratulations to the A-level politics students at Brockenhurst College for starting the petition that underlies this debate. And I think we can all agree that it's a pretty impressive piece of A-level project work to secure a debate in Parliament. No, I have only got 10 minutes. I am so sorry. We're just a couple of things. The Honourable Member opposite mentioned the Auger review. I have no doubt that I have fed in my feelings about further education. It's an independent review, but we await with anticipation. Somebody asked about timescales. I don't yet know when it will report. And just to reassure him, we're certainly not building any new colleges. Institutes of technology, which is possibly what he's referring to, are collaborations. This isn't about new buildings. This is about collaborations between FE and HE. And I cannot rehearse all the really, really valuable arguments that have been made, but I would point out, and we sometimes forget, that despite all the challenges that FE has, 81% of colleges are rated good or outstanding. But I do know that Ofsted have raised concerns about the financial stability of the sector and how finances constrain what FE colleges and sixth form colleges can do. And of course, we've heard a great deal of that today. The petition that underpins this debate was launched as part of the Association Colleges campaign, Love Our Colleges. I do. Campaigns such as this and Raise the Rate have indeed helped raise the profile. And we have had 18 speakers here today, Mr. Bone. The Honourable Member for Cambridge is right to talk about divisions, and underlying all this are divisions in society. And he is right that further education has been left behind, not just in terms of finance, but the domination of the higher education sector, which has crowded out any conversation about further education and how crucial it is to ensure that everyone, whatever their age, whatever their background, whatever their prior educational attainment, has the very best opportunities that are available should be available to those students. The Honourable Member for St Albans, I pick it up now, mentioned those with special educational needs. And as we all know, the further education sector offers a particularly high quality opportunity to make sure that those young people get a chance to get on in their lives. I did want to mention a little bit about mental health. I'm acutely aware of the particular stresses that affect young people in further education, probably disproportionately affected in further education. We're creating new mental health support teams to address these needs, and we will work with colleges to identify and train designated senior leads for mental health to oversee the mental health and well-being with appropriate backup support available. I think that's an important innovation. My right honourable friend for Harlow and my right honourable friend for Chingford pointed out so rightly that people develop at different stages in their lives. It does not all happen for people at 18 or 16. For many people, school has not worked well. Examinations at 16, 18 have not shown their true potential, and the door needs to remain open for those. In my view, everybody has potential, everyone has skill, is able to get on, get a job, a career, get on in their lives. What they need is the opportunity to develop that potential. My right honourable friend for South Holland and the Deepings, always eloquent, probably gave us the most succinct description of the problems we face. Higher education has dominated governments of all political persuasions. The media talk, everyone talks incessantly about higher education, and I well remember at the hustings in the 2017 election at my local university, when asked about tuition fees, my response was, what about the 50% that don't go to university? It didn't go down terribly well, but actually I felt strongly about it then, and it was well before I took on this job. My right honourable friend probably answered his own question on apprenticeships. We were determined to raise the quality, make apprenticeships high quality, relevant to the workplace and critically designed by employers, and such major reforms inevitably have resulted in a reduction in the numbers of apprenticeship starts, although we have that start to turn around. Rises at level 4 and 5 in degree apprenticeships now becoming a route of choice instead of full-time higher education courses, which is excellent. My honourable friend from Morley and Outwood rightly also pointed out the additional maths premium, and I'm not going to go through a whole raft of all the things that we've funded, Mr Bone, but she is also right that overall funding has not kept up with costs. She's also right that playing party politics does not help. I would urge members from all sides of the House to work together with me and with each other to make sure that we make the case. With the post-18 review going on, looking at HE, but also with FE, and with us looking at the sustainability of that sector, it is really important. That joint working is absolutely critical. The Right Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse mentioned the cross-party nature of this debate. He asked about underspends. It is likely that the department answer will state that any underspend is recirculated amongst other departmental priorities. I'll see if there are further details, but it does stay within education, although him, like me, I would like to see, Mr Bone, that spent on further education. The Honourable Member for Scunthorpe asked me specifically, what is the case? What are the priorities? I make no particular judgment about the various educational sectors, higher education, schools, but we hear a lot about schools funding and we hear a lot about tuition fees, but we don't hear much about FE. The case, well, there's a clear economic case, a productivity case. As a country, we cannot afford to adequately fund, not to adequately fund, the education of 50% of the population, so to make sure that we have the skills we need. But on a very personal level, it's about social mobility. It's about the fact that everyone deserves a chance. It is about community growth. The Honourable Member for Stoke Central raised mental health provision, and I have mentioned that, and also the complex other needs that students in FE have. Part of the case we need to make is that young people and adults often come into FE because their lives have been complex. Their learning needs are often not straightforward, and so teaching and learning is only part of the job that FE staff do. There are often many other needs that must be met before any learning can begin and take place. And I congratulate him on his very thoughtful and collaborative approach. And he's right that I need the help of all members. The Honourable Member for Hull, a real champion of her local college. She rightly raised the role colleges played in the community. It was indeed a delight to hear her say that. Not measurable, difficult to define, but of immense value. And the Right Honourable Member for Huddersfield probably summed this up better than many. She talks about lifelong learning. 35% of jobs are likely to be disappearing in the next 10 years due to automation. The National Retraining Scheme, where we're doing a lot of work, a lot of research, what works, 100 million from the Chancellor, collaboration between the TUC and CBI and government to address exactly the issues that she has raised. I've talked about the sustainability of the further education sector and FE funding in the spending review. I think it is time to articulate the case for FE. We talk about it not being schools and not being university. We need to have a very clear vision that everybody can get behind. We've identified some key issues about how we can put FE on a sustainable footing and deliver quality. There are a lot of questions we need to ask. How do we make sure there's a high quality education, further education offer in each local area so young people and adults have those opportunities to develop their skills and employers can access the training and skilled recruits they need. We want FE to be sustainable. We know that area reviews have done some of the work, but there's probably more work to do and more collaboration to do. The 16 to 18-year-old population has been declining for several years, but we will see an increase after 2020. By 2028, there will be around a quarter more 16-year-olds than there are today. So this is a problem that is coming up behind us. T-levels do not distract from this. This is an add-on. Often in parliamentary questions, I give the answer about how much money we're spending on T-levels. It is important. It isn't a substitute for core funding. I'm very, very aware of that. We also want to see a better and more visible offer for people at level 4 and 5 in technical education. And I think the Secretary of State emphasised that in his speech last month. What is the role of FE and HE institution? What is the role of loan and grant funding? And those are all bound up in the post-18 review. The key steps we have to take to help colleges recruit and train the teachers they need. Can I thank the Honourable Member for Cambridge again for securing this debate and everyone for their contributions. Can I reassure you that I will take these away and continue to champion FE as we prepare for the spending review. I reject any suggestion that I don't care about further education. I didn't go to university. I went via a route that included further education. I'm the first to challenge the intellectual snobbery that pervades actually many of the mainstream media, many of the broadcast media, and we have to turn that round. I want a society where, as I said, it doesn't matter where you came from.
Order. Apologise that the proposer didn't get a chance to wind up, but time has beaten us. Order. The sitting